Chapter 184. Among the 6 super mutant zombies, 4 of them attacked Immortal directly. Their attacks directly enveloped the area within a kilometer around Immortal. The area was covered by the light of all kinds of knives, swords, spears, and whips. Immortal had nowhere to hide. Immortal didn't hide. In fact, he didn't need to hide at all. A layer of blood-red scales quickly appeared on the surface of his body. A blood-red dragon-shaped helmet instantly formed on his head. Ding, 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 ding. Several ear-piercing sounds rang out from his dragon blood armor. Sparks kept appearing on his dragon blood armor. At this moment, Immortal didn't move at all. The dragon blood armor completely absorbed the huge power of these people's attacks. As a result, Immortal just stood there and swayed slightly. The 4 zombie kings all changed their expressions. Their attacks could even injure a level 10 super mutant zombie with an invincible body. The scale armor on this human's body actually had such a strong defensive power. The so-called invincible body didn't really mean that it could defend against all attacks. If they met someone stronger than them, such as Count Dracula, they could easily tear apart the invincible body. As level 10 super mutant zombies and zombie kings, their full-strength attacks might not be able to tear apart the invincible body. But at least they could injure it. And now, the armor on this human's body was even stronger than the invincible Vajra body. Of course, they didn't know that the dragon blood armor's defense could defend against any attack on Earth. Not to mention them, even if Count Dracula himself came, he would not be able to break through the defense. While they were still in shock, Immortal moved his right hand slightly. A blood-red machete appeared in his hand. Dark Ice Devil Slayer. With the 6 zombie kings' powers, the moment they saw the blood-red blade, they knew that it was not a simple weapon. If this human attacked with this machete, even they would have a hard time dealing with it. Their only chance of winning now was the female blood race. 2 zombie kings had already caught Emma. They hissed in their throats, "Put down your weapon, or we'll kill this woman." Before he finished speaking, Immortal suddenly turned around. The dark ice devil-slaying blade in his hand hacked down at a zombie king behind him. Seeing this, the zombie king was shocked. He quickly raised the long saber in his hand to meet the attack. Chi-chi, 2 soft sounds were heard. The zombie king was cut into 2 halves along with its blade. At the same time, the zombie king's body was frozen. Furthermore, with him as the center, the frozen area was rapidly expanding. Almost in the blink of an eye, it reached the feet of the other 3 zombie kings. Ka. The bodies of the 3 zombie kings were frozen in an instant. The remaining 2 zombie kings, who were holding their weapons against Emma's neck, were shocked. They originally thought that once they subdued this female vampire, this human would have some misgivings and wouldn't dare to make another move. At the very least, even if he wanted to play tricks, he would have to go through the process. But he never expected that this human would have no scruples at all. In fact, he didn't even hesitate in the slightest and instantly attacked. In this way, the zombie kings were caught off guard. They didn't know Immortal's character. Although this Emma had something to do with him, it wasn't a big deal. The reason why he brought her along was because this woman was related to the place near Castle Dracula, where the legend said that a giant dragon had once appeared. That was all. How could he be subdued because of her? Taking a step back. Even if this Emma had more to do with him, as long as she wasn't as close as he was with Happy, he would definitely not hesitate to attack. After all, he had always believed in one sentence in his heart. In the apocalypse, survival was the way to go. To be subdued and even lose his life for a woman who had little to do with him, he would never do such a stupid thing. At this time, the 2 vampires saw that the ice had already reached their feet. They quickly jumped and instantly jumped 100 meters into the air. At the same time, on their backs, wings tore through their clothes and stretched out. Everyone's wings were more than 5 meters wide. But when they flapped their wings and tried to escape, they found that their feet seemed to be pulled by something and they couldn't escape at all. When they looked down, they saw that their feet were wrapped by a sanguisurincus as thick as an arm. At this time, below the sanguisurincus, the ice had quickly spread along the sanguisurincus. The 2 vampires' expressions changed drastically. They flapped their wings frantically, and at the same time, their arms turned into sharp blades, trying to cut off the Sanguisurincus. However, it was too late. The chi of frost was spreading at an incredible speed. In just 2 seconds, it had spread to their feet. Then it spread to their legs, waists, chests, necks, and heads. In the end, the 2 vampires were frozen in the air. They looked like 2 ice kites that were being released. Originally, with the strength of these zombie kings, even if their bodies were surrounded by a 5-meter-thick ice layer, they could still break out of the ice. However, the cold air emitted by the mysterious ice devil slayer was no ordinary cold air. After the surface of their bodies was frozen, the cold air directly entered their bodies through their pores and sweat pores. It froze every single cell in their bodies. Think about it, if every single cell in your body was frozen, how could you still be able to jump around? Moreover, the mysterious ice devil slayer had a strong restraining effect on infected creatures. In order to expel this cold air, in addition to having an extremely terrifying physical strength like Count Dracula, one must have energy in the body. Unfortunately, they didn't have the strength of Count Dracula. Secondly, it was impossible for them to have energy in the body. As a result, the 6 zombie kings could only watch as their bodies were frozen from the inside out. At the same time, the ice layer was still spreading rapidly. The entire lake was frozen in a very short time. A mutant fish had just jumped out of the water and was directly turned into ice. It fell on the ice layer below with a thud. The ice layer continued to spread outwards. Within a radius of 10 kilometers, everything was frozen in just half a minute. Immortal's draconic thought swept across, and the 6 zombie kings were directly turned into blood-red ice fragments on the ground. Immortal raised the mysterious ice devil slayer and carefully looked at this blood-red curved blade. This was the first time he used the mysterious ice devil slayer at full strength. The effect was not bad. Although in terms of attack range, it was not comparable to the bloody handprint, let alone the draconic thought meteorite. However, in terms of restraining infected creatures, it was definitely not weak. At this time, Emma, who was not far from him, widened her eyes. She looked at the ground that was completely covered in ice in disbelief. Chapter 185. Emma looked at the frozen world. The lake water was frozen, the plants were frozen, and even the mutated birds that were flying in the sky were frozen and fell onto the ice. Her face was filled with disbelief. After a moment, she retracted her gaze and turned to the Asian man in front of her. She had already seen the powerful strength this Asian man had displayed before. No matter how strong this man was, she wouldn't be so surprised if he could destroy a country with one move. But now, with this slash, everything within a radius of 10 kilometers was frozen. She really couldn't understand. This wasn't a magic world, and he wasn't Princess Aisha. How could he freeze everything within a radius of 10 kilometers with one move? She really didn't understand. Immortal really did have the strength to destroy a country with one move. Immortal finished all this as if nothing had happened. He put away the mysterious ice demon slaying blade. Then with a thought, he took out a recliner from his backpack. He placed it on the ice and lay down comfortably. Looking up at the night sky, his eyes reflected the starlight. Emma, who was next to him, was very puzzled by Immortal's ability to make things appear so casually. But she had seen Immortal play like this many times during this period of time, so she was already used to it. Immortal seemed to be looking up at the starry sky at this time, but in fact, he was signing in his mind. System, special event sign in. Sign in successful. Sign in event, kill the zombie king. Sign in reward, 60 zombie king crystal cores. Immortal looked at the reward and couldn't help but smile. 60 zombie king crystal cores were enough for him to advance. He thought that he would waste some time since he hadn't signed in at the Dragon Palace for the past few days. But he didn't expect a pleasant surprise. He didn't have to avoid Emma. With a thought, he took out more than 10 zombie king crystal cores. Holding them in his palm, they turned into streams of heat and flowed into his body from his palm. After a while, he absorbed all 60 crystal nuclei of the zombie king. At the same time, his body temperature rose rapidly. After reaching the limit, He stopped for about 5 minutes before his body temperature slowly returned to normal. Breaking through was that simple. Looking at his mind, he saw that his attributes had changed. Name, Emosher, level 8 Great Hunter, level 2 Long Xianxia, evolution direction, Titan Dragon. He was now a level 8 Great Hunter, one step closer to the limit of level 10. Emma, who was not far away, did not know that in such a short time, the Asian man in front of her had increased by 1 level. She only saw a smile on Emosher's face for a while, and then he seemed to sigh. She had no idea what this man was thinking. The next morning, Emosher took Emma and flew toward Romania. At the same time, in Dracula's castle in Romania, Count Dracula had also received the news. Although the messenger of the Blood clan couldn't see Count Dracula's face, he could see his elegant and noble figure in the darkness. Earl, the 6 zombie kings you sent were all killed by that human being. Count Dracula paused for 2 seconds, a little surprised. I underestimated that human. In Count Dracula's opinion, the zombie kings were the most powerful beings in the world besides himself. He thought that it would be easy to send 6 zombie kings to kill that human being. He didn't expect that the 6 zombie kings would be killed by that human being. But what's done is done, it's just 6 zombies. The messenger of the Blood clan continued to ask, Earl, he's coming. Count, he's coming to our castle. Should we prepare anything? Count Dracula chuckled and said, What do we need to prepare? Do you think the tens of millions of mutant bats around the castle are just decorations? When the messenger of the Blood clan heard this, he thought of those mutant bats and felt a chill in his heart. There were tens of millions of mutant bats in the forest around the castle. The individual strength of those mutated bats was not strong. But when tens of millions of mutant bats attacked at the same time, even a level 10 super mutant Blood clan would be killed in a very short time. He had seen with his own eyes 3 level 10 super mutant Blood clan offend the Earl. In the end, the Earl ordered tens of millions of mutant bats to attack together. Those 3 level 10 mutant Blood clan members didn't even last half a minute. Thinking of this, the Blood clan member quickly lowered his head and replied, No. At the same time, he also thought of Count Dracula's strength. Those tens of millions of mutant bats were so strong, but they were still under Count Dracula's control. It was clear that Count Dracula's strength was stronger than those tens of millions of bats. With those tens of millions of mutant bats and Count Dracula's double insurance, that arrogant human being wanted to attack Castle Dracula was simply wishful thinking. Count Dracula said, So we don't need to prepare anything. Just wait for that arrogant human to walk into the trap. The messenger of the Blood clan member nodded. Yes, Count Dracula. Then he carefully retreated. Until this moment, a pair of blood-red eyes lit up in the darkness. Count Dracula's voice sounded. I, Count Dracula, have not used my full strength for more than 300 years. The humans in this world have probably forgotten the fear of being dominated by Count Dracula. The next afternoon, Emosher brought Emma to Romania. 80 kilometers away from Castle Dracula, Emosher floated in the sky. At this moment, the blood slave quietly flew over and landed on Emosher's shoulder. Through the dragon telepathic communication, the blood slave had already told him everything about the castle. Emosher knew that there was a cave on Mount Cerati behind Castle Dracula. People once said that it was the dragon's lair. But in an earthquake, the entrance to the dragon's lair was shaken and collapsed. But in fact, there was another entrance to the dragon's lair. It was in the wine cellar under Castle Dracula. This was also the reason why Emosher traveled so far to attack Castle Dracula. Within a few hundred kilometers around Castle Dracula, there were no cities or zombies. Because Count Dracula felt that those zombies were inferior creatures that would tarnish his castle. But the blood slave had previously detected that there were tens of millions of mutant bats in the forest around Castle Dracula. And these tens of millions of mutant bats were enough to condense into a larger blood Buddha. Thinking of this, Emosher was secretly delighted. In his mind, he checked the evolution points. Along the way, he had already accumulated more than 9 billion evolution points. Destroying these tens of millions of mutant bats and destroying Castle Dracula would definitely break through 10 billion points. At that time, the system would be upgraded again, and the rewards would be much more. And his dragon telepathic communication would probably directly break through to level 3. At the same time, he could check in at the dragon's lair, killing many birds with one stone. Chapter 186. Above the forest to the east of Castle Dracula. Immortal and Emma flew over slowly. Vampires could be seen flashing past the forest on the ground from time to time. Emma was shocked when she used her telekinesis to investigate. There were more than 100 blood breeds within a radius of 1,000 meters from her. But this was not what surprised her. Castle Dracula was the lair of the vampires, so it was not surprising that there were so many vampires around. What surprised her was that there were hundreds of mutated bats hanging upside down from almost every tree below. And they were all mutated vampire bats. Before they mutated, they lived by sucking blood. Now that they had mutated, their faces were even more ferocious. Their faces looked like those of a wild boar. But they were not as long as a wild boar's nose. 2 long fangs were exposed at the corners of their mouths. Each mutated vampire bat was more than a meter long. Their wingspans were more than 3 meters wide. With so many vampire bats surrounding her, even she, a level 10 psychokinesis, would have a hard time dealing with them. Moreover, this was only the vampire bats within a radius of 1 kilometer. If all the vampire bats in the surrounding forest were added up, there would be millions or even tens of millions of them. Even a level 10 super mutated zombie would not have a complete corpse if it barged in here. However, she turned her head to look at Immortal. This Asian man's strength should be able to easily deal with so many mutated vampire bats. And with this Asian man's personality, one slap from him could probably turn the entire area around Castle Dracula into ashes. Thinking of this, she hurriedly said to Immortal, who was beside her, "Can you let me go down to find my son first?" The reason why she took the risk to come to Castle Dracula with Immortal was that her sister had once taken her son to Castle Dracula for revenge and turned him into a vampire. She came here to find her son. As for the reason why Immortal brought her here, it was not because he was touched by the great love of a mother. This woman did make him feel good, but it was far from the point where he would bring her all the way to the lair of the vampires just to find her son. He had brought her here for another reason. Seeing Immortal's silence, Emma thought that he didn't agree. She begged, "Please, let me go down and look for my son. Just give me half an hour. Whether you can find it or not, do it when the time is up, okay?" Immortal shook his head. "Sometimes the result may not be as good as you think." Emma was slightly taken aback. This Asian man seemed to know something. Her blood-red eyes flickered slightly. After a while, he said with some difficulty, "No matter what the result is, I will accept it." As they spoke in the forest below, a mutated vampire bat suddenly flapped its wings and flew into the air. Then, the second, the third, the fourth, tens of thousands of blood-sucking bats flapped their wings and flew up. In the entire forest, more than 10 million bats flew up like a swarm of locusts, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. Even though Emma had already expected that there might be more than 10 million vampire bats here, she still couldn't help but feel her heart beating wildly at the sight of such a majestic sight. She subconsciously looked at Immortal, who was next to her. But she saw that Immortal still had an indifferent expression on his face. He was as calm as an ancient well. It was as if it wasn't tens of thousands of vampire bats that flew up, but just a fly. Soon, those tens of thousands of mutated vampire bats gathered in the sky. They actually gathered to form a huge bat pattern. Just think about it. How big would it be if 10 million huge vampire bats, each of which was more than a meter long, formed a gigantic bat pattern in the sky? It would cover the sky and cover the sun. The ground instantly darkened. The whole sky seemed to be occupied by this huge vampire bat. At the same time, a terrifying but elegant voice came from the huge vampire bat. "Easterner, you dare to break into Castle Dracula alone. You are too arrogant." Seeing this, Immortal slowly shook his head. This Count Dracula was not only pretending to be mysterious, but also blind. But on the surface, he didn't say anything. Before a fight, he never liked to talk nonsense. If he could fight, he would never talk nonsense. Count Dracula saw that Immortal didn't want to talk nonsense with him and seemed a little bored. He said, "I thought that all Easterners like to be reserved, but I didn't expect you to be different. Since that's the case, then accept the judgment of Count Dracula." Before he finished speaking, the huge bat pattern formed by tens of thousands of mutated vampire bats in the sky flapped its wings slightly and swooped down towards Immortal. Because of the flapping of its wings, within a radius of more than 50 kilometers, leaves suddenly flew and dust filled the air. On a nearby lake, there were also huge waves rolling. In the forest, the trees were constantly emitting cracking sounds. Seeing this, Emma's face suddenly changed. Even though she knew that Immortal was very strong, she couldn't help but be shocked at this time. After all, when she followed Immortal all the way here, she had never encountered such a strong attack. Immortal just shook his head slightly, with a thought. In the next moment, she saw the tens of thousands of vampire bats that were rushing towards Immortal melt at an extremely fast speed. They turned into tens of thousands of blood-red meat paste and fell from the sky. Pa, they fell to the ground. It was as if there was a rain of flesh and blood. Within a radius of tens of kilometers, all the trees, grass, and lakes were covered with a layer of flesh and blood in a short period of time. And this flesh and blood carpet was wriggling quickly, slowly condensing into a giant statue. About a minute later, this giant statue finally took shape completely. It was actually a blood Buddha that was about 2,000 meters tall and completely blood red. The blood Buddha stood between heaven and earth. In heaven and earth, only I am supreme. Its eyes were lowered, looking down on everything as if they were ants. In the hall of the ancient castle not far away, Count Dracula suddenly stood up in the darkness. He looked at the blood Buddha that stood proudly between heaven and earth not far away in surprise. He originally wanted to control these tens of thousands of mutated vampire bats to attack that Easterner. Even if he couldn't kill that human, it could still cause great news to him. When the time came, he would be able to kill this human easily. But he never expected that this human didn't even move, and these tens of thousands of mutated vampire bats were turned into meat paste. And they even condensed into such a huge blood Buddha. Previously, he had heard from his subordinates that the blood Buddha was terrifying. Therefore, he had been mentally prepared for this. The previous 2 times Immortal's blood Buddhas were condensed from the flesh and blood of zombies. So he thought that Immortal couldn't condense the blood Buddha with the flesh and blood of mutated beasts. And these mutated vampire bats all had the blood of the blood clan flowing in their bodies. Even if that human could really condense the blood Buddha with the flesh and blood of mutated beasts, he didn't think that the human could condense the blood Buddha with the flesh and blood of the blood clan. If it could be condensed, wouldn't it have been condensed long ago? Why wait until now? But he never thought that this was a trick that Immortal had left behind to numb him. Chapter 187. Count Dracula didn't expect that Immortal still had a trick up his sleeve. In fact, the blood Buddha avatar could be condensed from the flesh and blood of any infected creature. Immortal had only condensed from the flesh and blood of zombies the previous 2 times. Even when he was only 1 step away from condensing the dragon will, he didn't use the flesh and blood of vampires to condense the blood Buddha avatar. This was to make Count Dracula lower his guard. To make him think that Immortal couldn't condense the blood Buddha with vampires. At this time, the blood Buddha condensed by Immortal was 2,000 meters tall. Immortal looked down through the gaps in the clouds from the blood Buddha's perspective. He saw that the originally huge castle Dracula was now like a castle built by a child with blocks. He moved his mind. The blood Buddha's right palm slowly raised. The clouds in the surroundings started to move in all directions as the giant palm was raised. At this time, Emma, who was being held by Immortal and floating in the air, saw this giant palm, and her heart suddenly sank. If this palm fell, all the vampires would be finished. Her son would be finished too. She wanted to beg Immortal not to make a move first. However, based on her understanding of Immortal along the way, She knew that this Asian man would never be merciful. She could only cry and look at the castle below with difficulty. At this time, on the ground in the forest, there were more than 100,000 vampires. They saw the giant blood Buddha and the bloody palm in the clouds in the sky, and their faces were full of shock and horror. Even their count doesn't have this kind of strength, right? Furthermore, the gigantic blood Buddha gave them an extremely strong sense of oppression. Under this extremely strong sense of oppression, they didn't even have the slightest desire to fight. The only thing they wanted to do now was to escape. Almost all of the vampires flapped their wings and wanted to escape. But soon, a giant blood-red chain with a diameter of more than 10 meters appeared in the air. Both ends of the chain were pointed and had barbs. One end was directly nailed to the ground and pierced into it. It plunged deep into the ground. No one knew how deep it was. The other end quickly split into more than 100,000 chains and shot out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it pierced through the bodies of all the Blood Clan members. Even Count Dracula was no exception. At this moment, Count Dracula saw the giant blood Buddha slowly condense into a giant palm. A trace of shock appeared in his heart. For a mere human to be able to reach such a level of strength was far beyond his imagination. However, at this moment, a blood-red chain suddenly pierced through his body, causing him to be even more horrified. One had to know that his body was dozens of times stronger than the body of a normal level 10 mutated Blood Clan member. He didn't expect his body to be pierced through so easily. In his shock, he hurriedly tugged at the chain, wanting to tear it apart. His strength was immense. However, when he pulled, he was surprised to find that the chain was extremely sturdy. Even he couldn't break it. This brat, Count Dracula, was both shocked and angry. He was Count Dracula, the ancestor of the vampires, yet he was being tied up by a lowly human. Unforgivable! Unforgivable! Fortunately, after a moment, the chain in his body seemed to loosen. He pulled hard and forcefully pulled the chain out of his body. Although he also pulled out a fist-sized piece of flesh, it was nothing to him. His wound would heal very quickly. However, he soon discovered that the fist-sized wound on his chest had not healed at all. His self-healing ability seemed to have disappeared. How could this be? Ever since he became a blood breed, his body had an extremely strong self-healing ability. Even if his arms and legs were broken, they could grow back in just a few seconds. Now, it was just a hole in his chest, but it couldn't heal. What the hell was this? If it were an ordinary blood breed, they would definitely be terrified and turn around to flee. However, Count Dracula was not a blood breed who would give in easily. The noble blood of the blood breed flowed in his body. How could he admit defeat to a mere human? It was impossible for him to escape. Escape was impossible in this lifetime. He bent his body slightly, and in the next moment, he leaped up. He directly crashed through the roof of the ancient castle. While in the air, his body was rapidly changing. His body was rapidly growing in size. Soon, he reached a height of 100 meters. When he spread his wings, they were more than 500 meters wide. His eyes were blood-red as he looked at the large blood palm that had already formed. An ear-piercing shriek came out of his throat. Squeak. This shriek was obviously a sound wave attack. In his shriek, the clouds in the sky rolled and quickly spread out in all directions. All the blood breeds had their bodies pierced by the demon-binding rope and were originally extremely terrified. However, when they saw the 100-meter-tall Count Dracula, they were all overjoyed. Was the Count finally going to use his full strength? The Count had not used his full strength for hundreds of years. This lowly human did not understand the terror of the Count when he used his full strength. At this moment, the huge blood palm that was 10 kilometers long and nearly 6 kilometers wide was not affected at all by Count Dracula's shriek. It slammed towards the ground. The surrounding sea of clouds churned and surged wildly. Upon seeing this, Count Dracula bellowed in anger. Lowly human, lowly species, how dare you offend the noble blood breed? As he spoke, he flew towards the blood palm. Boom! The blood palm came down from the sky and bombarded the ground. Suddenly, a shockwave like a tsunami quickly swept across a radius of hundreds of kilometers. All the trees within hundreds of kilometers were directly torn apart by the tremendous force. All the infected creatures, including the level 10 mutated blood breeds, were directly torn apart by this shockwave. The level 10 mutated blood breeds were originally the strongest beings in the world. Now, they were directly torn apart by the shockwave of the blood palm. This was unimaginable in the past. In this huge shockwave, all the flowers and trees on the ground within a radius of 100 kilometers were directly swept away. Only the bare ground was left. The nearby mountains also seemed to shake violently a few times. Large chunks of mountain rocks rolled down continuously. When the last mountain rock fell, the whole world was finally quiet. Between heaven and earth, only the figures of Immortal and Emma were suspended in midair. Emma's pair of blue eyes were wide open as she looked at the ground. The ancient castle on the ground had long disappeared. Only a huge palm print that was 10 kilometers long and nearly 6 kilometers wide was left. Looking down from the sky, this palm print was blood red. It was so red that it seemed as if blood could drip out. It was so red that it made one's hair stand on end. It was so shockingly red. Chapter 188. Under the Palm. The whole world became quiet. Only a huge bloody palm print that was 10 kilometers long was left on the ground. 100,000 members of the blood tribe were all wiped out by this bloody handprint. At this time, Immortal closed his eyes slightly, feeling the enlightenment in his heart just now. His dragon's will was rapidly increasing. It had reached its limit. Thinking back to the time when he turned into a blood Buddha, standing between heaven and earth. Seeing everything as ants, observing the energy of heaven and earth. All kinds of feelings in his heart kept surging. Finally, at a certain moment, like a flood breaking through a dam, he broke through his limit. The whole world suddenly became clear. Everything within a radius of 150 kilometers seemed to be under his control. Name: Immortal. Level 8 Great Hunter. Level 3 Long Xianxia. Evolution direction: Titan Dragon. Phew! Immortal let out a long breath. The dragon's will had finally increased again. It was too difficult to increase the dragon's will. Of course, in contrast, the strength of the dragon's will was also far beyond imagination. Now that he was level 3 Long Xianxia, he could easily crush a level 10 Great Psychic who was 7 levels higher. If Count Dracula was in front of him now, Immortal could tear his body apart with just the dragon's will. One had to know that Count Dracula had an indestructible body. And it was even stronger than the indestructible body of all the other level 10 super mutant blood breeds. Not to mention ordinary swords, even the genetic weapons of a great hunter would not be able to cause any damage to his body. But now Immortal could directly tear his body apart with the dragon's will. It could be seen how violent the level 3 dragon's will was. But then again, dragons were naturally domineering and violent creatures. The dragon's will was naturally much more domineering than the psychic power of humans. At this time, in the huge bloody palm print, a piece of soil suddenly moved. Then the soil arched up. The way it arched up was obviously a human figure. A moment later, this human figure climbed up with difficulty. It was none other than Count Dracula. At this time, he had already shrunk to his normal size. No, he was even smaller than a normal adult. He looked about the same height as an 11 or 12-year-old child. He was naked from head to toe. His pale skin was covered in blood and flesh. The bloody hole in his chest still hadn't healed. Half of his face had also completely disappeared. His throat could be clearly seen from the outside of his face. But even so, he kept shaking his head and said with difficulty, "Impossible! How could we, the noble blood clan, be destroyed by a lowly human? Impossible! Absolutely impossible!" When Emma saw this, her body trembled. "Psst. Arthur, my child." Her eyes were filled with disbelief. His own child was actually Count Dracula. How was this possible? Didn't Count Dracula live for hundreds or even thousands of years? His child was only 11 years old now. How could he be Count Dracula? Immortal, on the other hand, had known from Emma's sister's memories that Emma's child was Count Dracula. In fact, Count Dracula was not a person's name, but a title. It was a title passed down by the blood race. The blood race seemed to be immortal, but in fact they would slowly age. Therefore, every 100 years, Count Dracula would choose the most talented member of the blood clan to inherit the title of Count Dracula. But this was only known to a very small number of high-ranking blood race members. As for where the Counts Dracula went after they stepped down, no one knew. Back then, Emma's sister brought her son, Arthur, to Count Dracula in order to take revenge on her. She turned him into a blood race member. In the end, Count Dracula inadvertently discovered that he had an extremely strong blood race talent. So, he passed on all of Count Dracula's inheritance to him, including his strength, which in a short 5 years, far exceeded the level of a level 10 super mutant blood race. And this Arthur, when he first came here, was only a 6-year-old child. Faced with the dark surroundings where there were vampires everywhere, his mentality was greatly distorted. This created the Count Dracula that everyone feared now. Of course, no matter how strong Count Dracula was, he couldn't have withstood the blood palm of the giant blood Buddha just now. The only reason he was still alive now was because Immortal had held back. He was afraid that this palm would destroy the castle's cellar, and he wouldn't be able to find the entrance to the dragon's lair. That would have to be found from Count Dracula's memories. At this moment, Immortal's wings vibrated slightly, and he brought Emma down into the blood-red palm print on the ground. After Emma landed, she hurriedly ran towards Arthur. Arthur, a mother. Arthur, do you still remember Mother? Very quickly, she hugged Arthur, who had holes in his chest and face. Child, are you okay? I'm Mother. Mother is here. It's okay, Mother will never leave you again. However, Arthur's eyes were dull. It was as if he couldn't remember anything at all. Just now, Immortal had used his draconic will to investigate this Arthur. After his draconic will had advanced to level 3, he could already detect the emotions of other living beings. When he found that Arthur's heart was filled with indignation and anger, he didn't hesitate to use memory plunder on him. Arthur's strength had been forcefully raised. Although his body's strength had increased, the strength of his brain cells couldn't keep up with the strength of his body. Therefore, after Immortal stole his memory, he became an idiot. At the same time, because the blood palm had a strong restraining effect on infected bodies, most of the blood-breed virus in his body had been killed. Although the remaining bit of blood-breed virus could ensure that he wouldn't die even with the holes in his chest and face. But that was it. At this moment, he had already become an ordinary idiot. Psychokinesis and corpse hunter aside. Even an ordinary person could easily finish him off with a crowbar. He was no longer a threat to anyone. Immortal didn't pay any more attention to the mother and son. He turned and walked in the direction of the giant palm print. With a move of his draconic will, the stones and soil on the ruins flew up and fell to the sides. Very quickly, he used his draconic will to dig a hole about 2 meters deep. In the hole, a stone door appeared. It was a circular stone door. There was a carving on the stone door. It was a blood-breed mother, holding a baby. Immortal knew from the memories of a few high-ranking blood breeds that in order to open this stone door, only the blood of the current Count Dracula's birth mother would be able to do so. Otherwise, if it was forcefully opened, it would detonate the explosives inside, causing the entire passage to be completely sealed. This was the real reason Immortal brought Emma to Castle Dracula. Chapter 189. Immortal used his dragon will to dig the stone door. He turned around and said to Emma, "I need a drop of blood." Emma was hugging her silly son with tears flowing down her face. Hearing Immortal's words, she naturally knew that Immortal wanted her blood. She immediately nodded, took her son's hand, and came to the stone door. Immortal's dragon will moved, and a small wound appeared on Emma's fingertip. A drop of blood dripped onto the stone door. The next moment, the blood seeped into the stone door. Then, the stone door trembled slightly. Accompanied by the sound of machinery, the stone door slowly moved to the sides. A deep and dark passage appeared in front of them. Immortal's dragon will probed into the dark cave. However, there were many bends in this cave. No matter how strong his dragon will was, it was impossible for him to go around so many bends and probe inside. He gently stroked the blood slave on his shoulder. Dragon will ordered, "Go." The blood slave seemed to understand human nature and nodded. Then, it flapped its wings and flew into the passage. Immortal used his dragon will to detect that there were a few vampires trying to escape more than 80 kilometers away. Although the bloody handprint just now destroyed most of the nearby vampires. But the vampires who were further away barely survived. But they were unlucky to be swept by Immortal's dragon will at this moment. Soon, the bodies of these vampires were torn into pieces. Then, they reorganized and finally formed a virus clone that looked exactly like Immortal. Immortal's dragon will moved. The virus clone ran towards the bloody handprint. A moment later, the virus clone arrived at the entrance and directly entered the passage. With Immortal's cautious personality, even if the blood slave had investigated clearly, he would still condense a virus clone and make another trip. Emma was slightly taken aback when she saw this person who looked exactly like Immortal. Could it be that this Asian man was also a twin? While the blood slave was investigating, Immortal directly signed in his mind. System, special event sign in. He was filled with anticipation. This time, they had destroyed Castle Dracula and killed almost all the higher-ups of the vampires. He should be able to get something good from signing in. The system quickly responded. Sign in successful. Sign in event. Destroy the vampire's lair, kill Count Dracula. Sign in reward. 1 drop of Dracula's blood, 1 Dracula's voyage diary, vampire summon. Although Immortal did not really kill Dracula, Dracula was still alive. However, the system had already determined that he had killed Count Dracula by wiping out the entire nest of the Blood Clan and cutting off Count Dracula's lineage. Immortal carefully examined the 3 rewards in his mind. Dracula's blood. Any blood breed that absorbs it will rapidly grow to the level of Count Dracula. It is completely under the command of the host. Immortal pondered for a moment. Dracula's blood was very useful to him at this stage. Dracula's voyage diary. The 3rd Count Dracula was passionate about ocean exploration. His diary recorded many secrets in the depths of the sea. Immortal's mind flickered as he took out the nautical diary. The diary looked very old and many of the corners of the book had been rolled up. Immortal casually flipped through a few pages. His heart couldn't help but jump when he flipped through it. On the last few pages of the diary, there were 2 maps. Although the map was a little sloppy, it could still be seen clearly. Although Immortal wasn't very good at geography in his previous life, he couldn't tell where these 2 pictures were. But in the center of these 2 pictures, there was a picture of an animal. The drawing was very ugly, but it could still be recognized that these 2 pictures were of dragons. Immortal instantly thought, could there have been a dragon's lair at the bottom of the sea? Did the 3rd Count Dracula discover that lair? He should be able to find the answer in this nautical diary. However, he still had things to do at this time, so he would keep this diary for later study. Then he looked at the last reward. Vampire summon. Use Dracula's blood to summon blood creatures. The type, number, and level of the summoned blood creatures are random. The summoned blood creatures will attack any creature with blood in their body, including the summoner. Use with caution. When Immortal saw this skill, he was secretly happy. Previously, when he summoned zombies and mutant beasts, he needed to have the corresponding zombies and mutant beasts within a certain range. If there wasn't, he couldn't summon them. Moreover, the zombies and mutant beasts summoned were weaker than Immortal. So those 2 skills seemed to be of little use. But this, vampire summon, didn't have this restriction. As long as he had Dracula's blood, he could summon blood creatures. And the type, number, and level of the summoned blood creatures were random. This was interesting. As for the summoned creatures attacking him, Immortal wasn't worried. With so many trump cards, why would he be afraid of these blood creatures? If it really didn't work out, he could just go straight into the dragon's lair and do whatever he wanted outside. At the same time, Immortal also received a message from the skill description given by the system. Blood realm? What's that? Immortal asked in his mind. The system was silent. Well, It seemed that he would have to slowly explore it in the future. While Immortal was thinking, the blood slave had already investigated the entire lair in the tunnel. In the huge dragon's lair below, there was nothing except for 2 dried corpses and a dried horse corpse. Immortal secretly thought, it seemed that the legend was true. In the legend, there was a horse wrangler who lost a horse. He went into the mountains and never came back. Another time, a young man fell into a cave in the mountains. He slid down the cave into a huge dragon's lair. It seemed that these were their corpses. Immortal didn't immediately go in, waiting for the virus clone to go through the minefield. It wouldn't be too late to go in after he was 100% safe. At this time, he turned around and looked at Emma. He saw that ever since Emma saw her son, Arthur, she had been hugging him as if she was afraid that she would lose her son if they separated. As for her son who became an idiot, he didn't respond to her calls. At first, she naturally couldn't accept it. But she quickly thought it through. Instead of letting her son become Count Dracula and suck human blood, it would be better to let her become like this. She would peacefully stay by her side. She naturally knew that her son became like this because of Immortal. Along the way, she had already seen this situation several times. Whether it was a vampire or a zombie, as long as Immortal looked at him, he would most likely become an idiot. But she didn't hate Immortal. She guessed that if this Eastern man didn't turn her son into this, then her son would most likely still want to kill them, and would still be that terrifying Count Dracula. So not only did she not hate Immortal, but she also thanked Immortal. She thanked Immortal for sparing her son's life in the end. There was a kind of person in the world who always thought of others with the greatest kindness. In fact, her thoughts weren't bad. It's just that Immortal didn't explain it to her. With Immortal's personality, he was too lazy to explain so much. What you think is your business, what I do is my business. Not convinced? Kill me if you have the ability. Chapter 190. Immortal wasn't worried about what Emma thought of him in her heart. But he suddenly remembered that Emma was a level 10 psychokinesis. If he gave her that drop of Dracula's blood, she would grow into the next Count Dracula. With Count Dracula's strength and level 10 psychokinesis, she would be the strongest existence on Earth apart from himself. With such a subordinate, he would save a lot of trouble. Thinking of this, he turned to Emma and said, I have a way to let you become as strong as other blood breeds without sucking human blood, and live a normal life like them. Are you willing to try it? Hearing Immortal's words, Emma looked at her son. After a moment, she nodded heavily. Now that she was a blood breed, she definitely couldn't stay in the human base. And because she insisted on not sucking human blood, her body was extremely weak now. She and her son would not be able to survive in the wilderness where infected creatures ran rampant. Now that there was a chance to become stronger without sucking human blood, she naturally had to seize it. Hearing this, Immortal took out a finger-sized white glass bottle with a thought. There was a drop of blood-red liquid in the bottle. Immortal said, Give me your hand. Emma hesitated for a moment, then extended her right hand. Immortal opened the bottle cap and poured the drop of blood into her palm. The drop of blood seemed to be alive as it rolled around in her palm a few times. Finally, it merged into her palm. At the same time, Immortal's dragons will probed her body. After the drop of blood entered Emma's body, it quickly infected all the cells in her body as if it was contagious. After her cells were infected by the virus in the drop of blood, they rapidly mutated. Generally speaking, there were 2 types of mutations. One was getting worse and worse. The other was becoming stronger and stronger. Emma was obviously the latter. Her cells were getting stronger and stronger. The toughness of her blood vessels was also getting stronger and stronger. In a short 5 minutes, she completed the mutation. At this moment, her physical strength, speed, and other aspects were exactly the same as the previous counts of Dracula. They were dozens of times stronger than ordinary level 10 blood breeds. Coupled with her level 10 telekinesis, she was probably 100 times stronger than the average level 10 mutated blood breeds. Such strength was enough to make him the strongest existence among all the previous counts of Dracula. At the same time, when she looked at Immortal, her gaze was filled with absolute reverence. It was the kind of reverence that was 100% obedient to Immortal. At the same time, her desire for human blood was greatly reduced. When Immortal had plundered her son Arthur's memories, he had already reached the level of Count Dracula. There was no need for him to suck human blood. The blood of other animals can also be substituted. It was just that to them. Human blood was more delicious than the blood of other animals. Immortal took out another bottle of recovery medicine and threw it to her. "Give it to him." This time, Emma didn't hesitate and fed her son the medicine. A few minutes later, a miracle happened. The bloody holes on his son's chest and face were healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just 5 minutes, his body had completely recovered. Seeing this, Emma's eyes were filled with tears. She repeatedly said to Immortal, thank you, master, thank you, master." Immortal shook his head. He ordered her, "Spend some time with your son today. From tomorrow onwards, you will conquer the remaining 8 blood breeds families. Then, bring these families to destroy all the mother nests in the world and eliminate all the zombies." Emma respectfully lowered her head and said, "Yes, master." She didn't know why she would obey such an order. It was as if she had done it for no reason, and she felt that it was only right to obey Immortal's orders. At this time, Immortal's virus clone had finished exploring the inside. There didn't seem to be any danger inside. Immortal then slowly walked inside. Emma took the initiative to stay outside. She helped Immortal keep watch. She hugged her son and watched as Immortal's figure gradually disappeared into the dark and deep passage. Her heart was filled with gratitude. She muttered, "Son, we have to be grateful to Master for the rest of our lives." If it weren't for Immortal, she would still be in the Manhattan base, tortured by the desire for blood every day. If it weren't for Immortal, she probably wouldn't be able to see her son again in this lifetime. Even if she did see her son, he would only be a bloodthirsty demon. But now, Immortal not only rescued her from the Manhattan base, but also allowed her to see her son. He also allowed her strength to greatly increase in a short period of time. He gave her and her son the ability to survive in the wilderness. And he also restored her son's body. She had never been willing to judge others with malice in her life. Moreover, Immortal had helped her and her son so much. She was naturally only grateful to Immortal. As for being deprived of part of her freedom, she had never thought about it. In her opinion, in order to repay Immortal's kindness, she should do anything for Immortal. At this time, Immortal had already followed the passage and turned many times. Finally, he came to a huge and empty cave. In a corner of the cave, there were 2 mummified corpses and a mummified horse corpse. Other than that, there was nothing else. This should be the former draconic ruins. However, there were no dragon skeletons in this draconic ruins, nor were there any claw marks left by a giant dragon. Immortal's dragons will thoroughly checked this place 3 times. Only then did he say, "System, sign in." The system's voice suddenly sounded frowny face sign in successful. Sign in location, Draconic Ruins, sign in reward, 1, Demon Suppressing Orb, sign in reward, 2, Dragon Scale, sign in reward, 3, Dragon's Will. Immortal looked through these 3 rewards carefully. He had an understanding in his heart. Among them, the one that excited him the most was the Dragon's Will. Originally, the improvement of Dragon's Will was extremely difficult. Especially after advancing to level 3 this time, he could clearly feel that his Dragon's Will was much stronger than before. Originally, with his Dragon's Will that had just advanced to level 3, he didn't know how long it would take for it to level up again. But this time, a wisp of Dragon's Will had increased his total Dragon's Will by a large margin on the basis of level 3. He estimated that with 2 more wisps of Dragon's Will, his Dragon's Will would be able to level up again. As for the Dragon Scale, the effect was exactly the same as the previous one. Immortal didn't know why the system rewarded him with so many Dragon Scales. The Demon Suppressing Orb was a bead the size of a walnut. It was nurtured in the body of a giant dragon and had a righteous aura. A single bead could suppress 10,000 demons. However, this demon-suppressing orb was a one-time consumable. If he wanted to obtain it again after using it up, he could only use his evolution points to designate a reward to sign in. Just as Immortal was secretly rejoicing in his heart, suddenly, on the stone wall next to him, the sound of a mechanism could be heard. Ka-ka-ka. A stone door had actually appeared on the seemingly intact stone wall. Then ka-ka-ka, ka-ka-ka. One after another, the sound of a mechanism could be heard. On the stone wall, stone doors appeared one after another. The stone doors weren't big, only the size of a room's door. From each stone door, a figure walked out. Chapter 191. 5 figures walked out of the 5 stone doors. The 5 figures were pale, and their eyes were bloodshot. In the dark tunnel, Immortal could not see their faces clearly even with his eyesight. In this dark and lonely environment, the 5 figures gave off a strong sense of oppression just by standing there. Immortal scanned them with his blood dragon's eye, and their abilities were immediately displayed. Species, blood breed. Level 10 supermutated. The 5 of them were all level 10 supermutated. At this moment, one of the black figures spoke slowly. Lowly human, how dare you trespass into the sacred land of the blood breed? This is unforgivable. Another black figure spoke slowly, and his voice sounded like metal plates rubbing against each other. What a powerful human. I'm at the critical stage of my breakthrough. Sucking his blood will definitely be beneficial to my breakthrough. The other 3 black figures spoke one after another. You must have killed many members of the blood breed to be able to make it here. Since that's the case, stay here. This is the territory of the blood breed. Lowly human, no matter how powerful you are, you won't be able to escape death today. As they spoke, their black cloaks fluttered even though there was no wind. The 5 of them seemed to have grown much taller in an extremely short period of time. Soon, the 5 of them had filled up 1/5 of the entire cave. Moreover, they were still expanding. Immortal shook his head slowly. From Arthur's memories, he already knew that there were people in this cave. After the successive counts Dracula left their positions, they had all hidden in this so-called sacred land of the blood breed and trained hard in order to break through their limits and reach the next realm. This was because in the ancient legends, their lifespan would only increase when they broke through to the next realm. Even if each generation was 100 years old, the oldest of the 5 old fellows was an old monster who had lived for more than 500 years. Every single one of them was stronger than Arthur from before. Each of them even had their own unique skills. However, after Immortal checked their abilities, he directly ignored them. No matter how strong the 5 of them were, they were still too weak compared to him. And this time, he didn't even bother to lift a finger. The dragon thought stirred and directly took out that demon-suppressing orb. This demon-suppressing orb was only the size of a walnut and looked like a glass ball. However, there seemed to be something indescribable contained within this glass ball. When he took out the demon-suppressing orb, he did not need to activate it with dragon will, nor did he need to activate it with energy. It just sat there quietly in the palm of his hand. The 5 huge shadows in the surroundings immediately let out heart-wrenching screams. At the same time, the black shadow kept twisting and struggling. It was shrinking rapidly. In the end, the 5 shadows turned into 5 pools of blood. At the same time, the things inside the demon-suppressing orb were exhausted and turned into a pile of powder. Immortal used his draconic will to carefully sense the process of the demon-suppressing orb killing the 5 experts. There was no earth-shattering momentum, nor was there any glaring light. Just like that, the 5 experts were killed. It was just this simple and unadorned. From a microscopic point of view, this demon-suppressing orb actually emitted a kind of microwave that couldn't be seen or felt by the naked eye. When this microwave came into contact with the 5 experts, it directly destroyed the virus chromosomes in their bodies and caused a photochemical reaction, killing the virus in their bodies. The principle was similar to ultraviolet disinfection. However, the microwave emitted by this demon-suppressing orb was many times stronger than ultraviolet light. It could easily kill the virus in the 5 experts' bodies. The 5 blood breed experts were almost all infected with the blood breed virus. Now that the virus in their bodies had been killed, they naturally couldn't live. Therefore, from this perspective, the stronger the infected creature the demon-suppressing orb encountered, the better the effect. Moreover, the demon-suppressing orb ignored levels. Even if an enemy who was thousands of times stronger than Immortal stood in front of him, as long as he was infected, he could still silently kill him. Most importantly, such a domineering demon-suppressing orb had no restrictions. With this orb in hand, the world was mine. Although Immortal had obtained a few items or skills that ignored levels before, they were all used for defense or had very strong restrictions. They either required energy or had a short usage time. Or the stronger the opponent, the worse the effect. Only this demon-suppressing orb was the only one without any restrictions. It truly ignored levels. At this moment, after killing the 5 guys, Immortal looked at his evolution points again. He happily found that his evolution points had exceeded 10 billion. At the same time, a system notification appeared in his mind. Frowny face evolution points have exceeded 10 billion. You can upgrade. Do you wish to upgrade now? Immortal replied in his mind, upgrade now. This upgrade will take 12 hours. You cannot sign in during the upgrade. Immortal was already familiar with this. He was overjoyed. This trip to Castle Dracula was definitely a rewarding one. Dragon thoughts leveled up, obtained a powerful subordinate, obtained a lot of rewards, and now the system was about to upgrade. Turning around and leaving the dragon's nest, Immortal was in a good mood. His dragon thoughts moved. In the next moment, boom 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 boom. A total of 100 meteorites smashed into the mountain behind him. Flames soared into the sky, smoke and dust filled the air. Amidst the deafening explosion, the undulating mountain range within a radius of tens of kilometers collapsed with a loud rumble. After a long time, when the flames disappeared, the smoke and dust dispersed. Looking at the mountain again, there was no sign of the mountain. Within a radius of tens of kilometers, it had been razed to the ground. This was the terrifying destructive power of Immortal's dragon thoughts after leveling up to level 3. Arthur was so scared that he curled up in his mother's arms, his body trembling. Emma hugged her son tightly. Looking at the ruins of the mountain, the shock in her heart was more intense than ever before. Although after Immortal's appearance, she was already shocked to the point of numbness. But this time, she was still shocked to the point of speechlessness. A person's psychic power could reach such a terrifying level? This was too strong. She had always thought that her master should be a psychic master. And it was very likely that he was a top level 10 psychic master. But now it seemed that she still underestimated her master's strength. This was probably far beyond the realm of a level 10 psychic master. Her level 10 psychokinesis was already considered an absolute powerhouse. But compared to her master, it was like a firefly compared to the sun. She was nothing at all. Mosher took one last look at Emma and said, "Let's start working tomorrow." After saying that, his figure moved. His figure disappeared instantly. Only a 100-meter-tall giant dragon shadow was left in place. Emma looked at the huge dragon projection and came to a realization. Her master's strength was heaven-defying, and all kinds of methods were beyond her understanding. It seemed that as long as she followed her master in the future, her silly son might recover one day. Chapter 192. The world was very big. There were a lot of zombies. More than 7 billion zombies. In addition to birds, there were 200 to 400 billion. There were estimated to be 1 trillion mammals. With so many infected creatures, for Immortal, it was like a huge treasure trove of evolution points. However, with so many infected creatures, if Immortal wanted to kill them all by himself, he would probably be exhausted to death. Therefore, he had already begun to train his subordinates. Let these subordinates kill those infected creatures. According to the system's judgment, the evolution points obtained by his subordinates from killing infected creatures would also be counted on his head. Therefore, Immortal only needed to train a large number of subordinates. Let them kill infected creatures. Then he could peacefully stay in the base. Wouldn't it be wonderful to watch the evolution points enter his account every day? This Emma was the first subordinate he had recruited. At around 10 o'clock that night, a system prompt appeared in his mind. Frowny face. System upgrade successful. Upgrade reward 1. A herd of cattle, 10. Upgrade reward 2. A herd of goats, 10. Upgrade reward 3. A herd of birds, 100. Random type. Upgrade reward 4. A herd of animals, 100. Random type. Emosure looked at these rewards. Not only was he not unhappy, but he was also a little excited. He had thought many times before. Except for a small number of animals in the base, all the other animals in the world were infected. After those infected animals were cleaned up, what would happen to the entire ecological chain? Without animals, the ecological chain would not be able to function. The humans on Earth would still only end up being destroyed. And now, these rewards from the system's upgrade were absolutely timely. With these animals, when he signed in other animals in the future, he could build a miniature ecosystem around the C1 base. When the number of these animals slowly increased, this ecosystem could expand to the entire Wuxia and even the whole world. Moreover, when he carefully looked at these rewards, he was delighted to find that these animals obtained from the system were absolutely immune to harmful viruses. This was amazing. Even if other infected creatures bit these animals, they would definitely not be infected. Then, the system's voice continued. Frowny face. Upgrade content. The number of sign-in rewards has increased. A maximum of 10,000 of the same items can be obtained each time. This time, there was only one upgrade content. But just this one item made Emosure excited. Every time he signed in, he would receive 10,000 of the same items. With the addition of the Dragon Palace, he could obtain 20,000 pieces. In that case, wouldn't he be able to level up again in just a few days? Furthermore, after leveling up, it would only take a month at most before it could level up again. In other words, it would take him 40 days to become a level 10 Great Hunter. Just thinking about it made him a little excited. Naturally, the more rewards there were, the more evolution points he would need. If he chose 10,000 rewards each time, he would need 11 million evolution points. However, this was not a problem for the current Emosure. He already had more than 10 billion evolution points. Now that he had so many subordinates helping him earn evolution points, he could earn around 10 million evolution points every day. Would he be afraid of not having enough evolution points? Emosure did not return to base C1 immediately. Since they were out, they might as well take a look at the other bases. Therefore, in the next few days, he went to every base in the world. With his dragon's will, he did not even need to enter the base. As long as he was tens of kilometers away from the base, he could activate psychokinesis. In every base in the world, he left 10 psychokinesis. With his level 3 dragon's will, he could activate psychokinesis 10 times a day. Each time, he could activate 10 psychokinesis. Moreover, he could directly increase their telekinesis to level 10. Apart from Wuxia, there were only 30 bases left in the world. He spent 3 days and left 300 level 10 psychokinesis. He ordered them to go to every corner of the world to kill zombies and infected creatures. In that way, the Blood Breeds had Emma as their commander. The zombies were killed by these 300 level 10 psychokinesis. Emosure could return to base C1 and peacefully enjoy his life. As for the dragon's nest in the sea that was recorded on the map in Dracula's voyage diary, Emosure planned to wait until his sea dragon avatar was at least level 10 super mutated before exploring. 3 days later, Emosure finally returned to Wuxia. He once again created 10 virus doppelgangers and had them clean up all the infected creatures in Wuxia except for Emperor Qin's mausoleum. With Emosure's current strength, the virus doppelganger he created was already a level 4 Great Hunter and a level 1 Psychic Master. He was definitely one of the top existences on Earth. Of course, he also wanted to create a virus doppelganger with Dragon's Will. However, not everyone could withstand Dragon's Will. He estimated that when he reached level 5 Long Yanshi, the virus doppelganger he created should be able to withstand Dragon's Will. Emosure and Happy had not seen each other for 5 days. Happy was naturally very happy to see Emosure return. When Emosher saw that Happy was happy, he was naturally very happy too. For the next 3 days, Emosher didn't ask anything, nor did he care about anything. He just drank tea, chatted, and watered the flowers with Happy. It was very peaceful. As for the work at the corpse farm, Happy was still conscientious. The leaders of the corpse farm, including the base's chief, had persuaded her many times to stop. After all, she was Emosher's girlfriend. How could they let her do this kind of work? However, Happy did not agree. She felt that it was the apocalypse now, and the base could not afford to keep idle people. She could not be the only idle person. Besides, she did not know any other skills. She was very familiar with the work of raising corpses. Most importantly, the first time she met Brother Mo was at the corpse farm. She still remembered how Brother Mo patiently taught her how to raise corpses. Therefore, every time she raised corpses, her heart would always be filled with happiness. After dinner, Emosher and Happy took a walk along the tree-lined path. Happy held Emosher's arm. When they met other people along the way, although she was a little shy, her eyes were filled with happiness. Emosher could not help but tease her. "Don't call it happy. Call it happy." Happy nodded and gestured with her hands. Whatever Brother Mo says. Emosher had nothing to do, so he used the blood dragon's eye to look at Happy. He found that her level was still a question mark. It seemed that the time for the last question mark to be unlocked was longer than the previous two. 3 days later, Emosher and Happy went to the base chief's office while taking a walk. They understood the current situation of the base. In the base, the first level, 7 Hunter had already appeared. The number of people above the level of Corpse Hunter had reached more than 33,000. There were also more than 500 people in psychokinesis. Emosher used another day to activate 100 level 10 psychokinesis. In this way, as long as he stayed in the base for a while, base C1 would become the strongest base in the world. There was no other. The strength of the base has increased, and the infected creatures outside have also been cleaned up. Emosher then placed the animals he obtained from signing in around the base. He reminded the base chief not to hunt these animals first. They could only be hunted after the ecosphere around the base was almost formed. The people in the base were naturally very surprised that Emosher could get so many uninfected animals. But that was all. Emosher had displayed too many abilities. They were already shocked to the point of numbness. It was not strange for anything to happen to Emosher. It was not until all of this was done that Emosher's consciousness once again entered the sea dragon clone's body. Chapter 193. Emosher finished arranging everything. That night, his consciousness finally entered the body of the sea dragon doppelganger again. He was now the most powerful being in the world. But he felt that it wasn't enough. He always vaguely felt that there was some kind of restriction on Earth. The limit of infected creatures was level 10 super mutant, and the limit of humans was level 10 great hunters. He would definitely encounter such a restriction when he became a level 10 great hunter in the future. If this restriction couldn't be broken in a short time, it would take him 7 years to break through, just like the level 10 hunters at the beginning. That was really too long. And the sea dragon clone could at most be 1 level higher than him. So it was very necessary for him to quickly raise the level of the sea dragon clone. At this moment, with a thought, the strength of the sea dragon clone appeared in his mind. Species, sea dragon, level 5 strong mutant, ability, evolution by devouring, dragon telekinesis attack. He hadn't seen this guy for 8 days, but this guy had only leveled up once. Emosher shook his head. It was a bit slow. It seemed that he had to level up as soon as possible, then leave the Yellow River Basin and go to the sea. After all, there were endless possibilities in the sea. And in the sea, there was a dragon ruins waiting for him to explore. Emosher scanned with his dragon telekinesis and detected that on the shore 5 kilometers downstream, there was a strong mutant tiger more than 5 meters long squatting at the entrance of a cave on the shore, ambushing a mutant wolf. Emosher immediately swam downstream. With the speed of the sea dragon clone, he could now swim 5 meters per second. Although this speed wasn't as fast as a human running at full speed, Don't forget that this was in the water. And with the speed of the river, he could swim 7 or 8 meters per second downstream. Soon, Immortal controlled the sea dragon clone and came to the shore. Probing with his dragon telekinesis, he could easily detect that the strong mutant tiger seemed to be napping. He opened the blood dragon's eye and checked its level. Species, mutant tiger, level 6 strong mutant. Immortal quietly dived out of the river. Then he swam diagonally to the surface of the water. At a certain moment, splash! With a huge splash, the 15-meter-long sea dragon clone instantly rushed out of the water. The mutant tiger suddenly turned its head. He subconsciously wanted to escape from the shore. However, at this moment, Immortal's dragon will spread out. Dragon will attack. Although the sea dragon clone's dragon psyche attack wasn't as ferocious and domineering as Immortal's level 3 dragon psyche, it still stunned the ferocious tiger. While he was distracted, the sea dragon's clone bit down. It actually bit off that huge tiger head in one bite. Then, its body kept rolling and swaying, dragging the mutated tiger's body into the water. After eating heartily, a crackling sound quickly came from his body. His body length was rapidly increasing. Finally, it stopped at 16 meters. Species, Mosasaurus, level 6 strong mutation ability, evolution by devouring, dragon psychic attack. Immortal's moves were indeed extraordinary. In just half an hour, the sea dragon clone had leveled up. In fact, with the strength of the sea dragon clone and the dragon will attack, it was not difficult to deal with some strong mutant beasts below level 10. However, after the sea dragon lost Immortal's control, its self-awareness wasn't human after all. Even with a powerful ability like the dragon psychic attack, it was difficult to exert its full power. It wouldn't turn around and run away if it encountered something 1 or 2 levels higher than it. However, it would be very difficult to kill it. That was why it had only leveled up once after Immortal left for so many days. At this moment, Immortal was already extremely proficient in using the dragon will. As long as it was a strong mutant beast below level 10, he could easily kill it. That night, Immortal controlled the sea dragon clone and killed 3 strong mutant beasts in a row. The sea dragon clone's level was directly raised to level 8. It wasn't until dawn that Immortal's consciousness returned to his body. Although the sea dragon clone had leveled up twice in a row, it was still very tiring for him. And it had only leveled up twice, so he was still a little dissatisfied. At this rate, it was still unknown whether he could reach level 10 tonight. No, he couldn't go on like this. At this rate, when would he be able to reach a level higher than himself? He had to think of a way. That night after he had rested, Immortal didn't directly transfer his consciousness into the sea dragon clone. Instead, he set off and ran in the direction of the Yellow River. When he arrived near the Yellow River, the blood dragon wings grew out of his back. The wings flapped slightly, and he flew downstream from above the Yellow River. At the same time, the dragon psychic attack swept over and took in all the mutant creatures in the Yellow River. Soon, he discovered several strong mutant beasts between level 8 and level 10. Immortal's dragon psychic attack moved, intending to knock out a level 8 mutant beast. However, the dragon psychic attack had just leveled up to level 3, so he wasn't very familiar with the strength of the dragon psychic attack. He had accidentally killed the level 8 mutant beast with the shockwave. Immortal was a little embarrassed. He could only reduce his strength and continue to shock the other strong mutant beasts with the dragon psychic attack. All the strong mutant beasts were knocked out. Then he led them with the dragon psychic attack and quickly swam toward the sea dragon clone. More than 2 hours later, all the strong mutant beasts between level 8 and level 10 were delivered to the sea dragon clone. And each of the strong mutant beasts only fainted, none of them died. At this time, without Immortal's control, the sea dragon clone was still hissing excitedly. It pounced on these strong mutant beasts. Only half an hour later, it had devoured more than a dozen level 8 mutant beasts and a level 9 mutant beast, and finally advanced to level 9. Immortal nodded slightly. At the same time, he secretly cursed himself for not realizing this before. The system only said that if the sea dragon clone wanted to advance, It had to eat live mutant beasts. There was no restriction on whether the sea dragon clone caught the mutant beasts itself. He had gone into a dead end at that time. Now, he could easily control these strong mutant beasts with his main body and let the sea dragon clone devour them. Wouldn't this save a lot of trouble and increase his strength much faster? Soon, after the sea dragon clone devoured these mutant beasts, its strength had increased to level 10. As long as it advanced by one more level, it would be promoted to a super mutant beast. Some people would say that this way, it would level up too quickly. Without combat experience, its combat strength would still be trash, and it would be like pulling up seedlings to help them grow. Mo sure believed that if he could crush his opponent with his level, why would he need combat experience? It was like an adult fighting with a 3-year-old child. With a slap, the child would cry home to his mother. Why would he need combat experience? So most of the time, level suppression was the way to go. Chapter 194. Mo sure felt gratified to see the sea dragon clone reach level 10. It was like seeing his son finally enter the 6th grade. However, just the 6th grade wasn't enough. There were still middle school, high school, and college, so he had to continue to level up. Mo sure continued to search the Yellow River Basin. In the end, he found the only dozen or so level 1 mutated beasts in the Yellow River Basin. It was still the dragon consciousness that knocked them out and left them for the sea dragon clone to devour. The sea dragon clone's first choice was a mutant crocodile. This mutant crocodile was much bigger than the ones Mo sure had encountered in the dam. It was more than 20 meters long and 2 to 3 meters tall. Its body was covered with a thick layer of scales that reflected a metallic luster. It had a huge mouth more than 5 meters long, and the sharp teeth inside were uneven, shining with a cold light. A timid person would probably pee their pants just by looking at it. Mo sure originally thought that if the sea dragon's teeth couldn't break through the mutant crocodile's defense, he would have to help it. It was really troublesome. But he didn't expect the sea dragon to be so smart. It used 2 barbed fins to break open the mutant crocodile's long palate and ate directly from its mouth. A moment later, the mutant crocodile was eaten until only an empty shell was left. At the same time, the dull sound of bones growing came from its body. Crack, crack, crack. Its body was growing rapidly. Hard horny scales also began to grow on the surface of its body. They looked exactly the same as the crocodile's scales. Its fins became thicker and thicker, and it already looked like a crocodile. Its mouth also became longer, closer to the appearance of a crocodile's long palate. It became more conducive to biting. A moment later, its body had reached 20 meters in length. Fur branches grew on its body. At first glance, it looked like a mutant crocodile. But if one looked carefully, they would find that its face was even more ferocious than a crocodile. On the top of its head, there were hard barbs the length of a finger. Its tail was about 7 or 8 meters long. And this tail was very strange. It was actually triangular. Hard scales grew on each of its horns, making it look like a 3-edged blade. From the neck to the tip of the tail, there was a serrated blade. On the whole, it looked more aggressive and had a stronger defense. At a certain moment, a thought flashed through Mo sure's mind. Didn't this guy look a bit like an earth dragon? In Western legends, dragons were divided into many types. Among them, according to how they traveled, there were flying dragons and earth dragons. The earth dragon's strength and status were much lower than the flying dragons. Some people even thought that the earth dragon could only be considered a subdragon species and not a true dragon. However, Mo sure felt that no matter how low the earth dragon status was, it was still related to the word dragon. If there really was an earth dragon, Mo sure felt that it should be this fellow. He used the blood dragon's eye to look again. Species, sea dragon, level 1 super mutated, ability, evolution by devouring, dragon psychic attack, death roll. It had finally reached super mutated dragon using this method to devour to evolve dragons. Devour evolution. In the past, he didn't know what he was thinking, but he didn't think of this point. Next, it was time to head for the sea. Sure waited for the sea dragon doppelganger to finish devouring the remaining mutant beasts before controlling it to swim towards the estuary of the Yellow River. Its speed was now 20 meters per second. Even so, it still took them more than 3 hours to reach the estuary of the Yellow Sea. At this time, Sure had already caught hundreds of super-mutated beasts below level 3. After knocking out these super-mutated beasts, he stored them in his personal reservoir. Then, he let the sea dragon clone enter the personal reservoir and eat. This was safe and wouldn't be discovered by other creatures. Sure's consciousness returned to his body and he sighed. This was more tiring than raising a son. But it was worth it. When it grew up, it could go treasure hunting in the sea. And in the future, its strength could surpass his by a large realm. At that time, it would be his biggest trump card. While the sea dragon clone was eating in the personal reservoir, Sure returned to base C1 under the moonlight. The next morning, after breakfast, Sure's consciousness returned to the sea dragon clone. At this time, the sea dragon clone was 23 meters long. Overall, it was even more mighty and domineering. It was already a level 3 mutant beast. It was definitely the first time in the world that a level 1 super-mutated beast had risen 2 levels in one night. Even Sure took a few months to advance from a level 1 Great Hunter to a level 3 Great Hunter. Looking at the personal reservoir, it was empty except for the sea dragon clone. There were no other mutant beasts. Sure immediately ordered a virus clone to go to the Yellow Sea and capture dozens of level 4 and level 5 super-mutated beasts to store in the personal reservoir. Now that he had familiarized himself with the level 3 dragon telepathy for the past few days, the virus clones he could condense were even stronger. Most of them were level 4 Great Hunters and level 3 Psychic Masters. With their strength, let alone level 4 and level 5 super-mutated beasts. Even level 6 and level 7 super-mutated beasts wouldn't be a problem. So Sure could relax for a few more days. But Sure didn't know that he wouldn't be able to relax for a few days. Antarctica, McMurdo Dry Valley, also known as Death Valley. When many people thought of Antarctica, the first thing that came to mind was a world of ice and snow. But McMurdo Dry Valley didn't have a trace of ice and snow. Because in this valley, the cold wind whistled all year round. The cold wind blew at a speed of more than 300 kilometers per hour, taking away all the moisture in the air. So it hadn't rained or snowed here for more than 2 million years. The entire valley was barren. There were only large and small stones. And between these stones, there were hundreds and thousands of sea beast skeletons. There were penguin skeletons, seal skeletons. So this place was called Death Valley. There were many strange things in the valley. Among them, there were 2 that were the most terrifying. First, this place was more than 50 kilometers away from the nearest coastline. Why would seals and other marine animals travel such a long distance and die here in groups? Second, and also the most terrifying thing, when you walked along the valley full of animal skeletons to the end, you would find a glacier. And on top of the snow-white glacier, there was a blood-red waterfall. This blood-red waterfall flowed down the glacier, all the way to the dry valley, and then it would dry up. Here, every once in a while, blood-red liquid would spurt out from the glacier. When it flowed into the dry valley, it would disappear. It was said that many exploratory teams had mysteriously disappeared after coming here. But at this time, in the fierce wind, above the blood-red waterfall, 2 light blue lights slowly appeared. At first, it was just 2 balls of light the size of wash basins. A moment later, these 2 balls of light began to slowly condense into human silhouettes. Another 5 minutes later, the light completely condensed into 2 humans. Chapter 195. Death Valley, above the blood-colored waterfall. Suddenly, 2 light blue orbs appeared. Gradually, the pale blue ball of light condensed into 2 humans. One of them was a bald middle-aged man, while the other was a young man with shoulder-length hair. The long-haired young man looked at his body from head to toe and said curiously, "Isn't this teleportation technology too awesome?" The bald middle-aged man smiled and explained, breaking down a human body into molecular form and teleporting it to a planet 30 light-years away. Then reassembling the molecules and forming a human form again. This is called disassembling and reassembling teleportation. The long-haired young man joked, "You can reassemble after disassembling? Isn't this the same as resurrecting us after killing us once? Isn't it too awesome to resurrect the dead?" The bald middle-aged man explained patiently, "Young master, you must be joking. The technology of resurrecting the dead hasn't been developed yet. This disassembling and reassembling technology is just an improved version of the ancient microwormhole teleportation technology." The long-haired young man waved his hand and looked a little impatient. I know. There are very few large wormholes in space, but microwormholes that are invisible to the naked eye are everywhere. The microwormhole technology is a teleportation technology that breaks down an object into molecular form and transmits it to a designated coordinate through the microwormhole before reassembling the molecules. The long-haired young man recited it like a high school student reciting history and politics. The bald middle-aged man smiled and said, "Young master is indeed a top student." The long-haired young man waved his hand and looked even more impatient. "All right, let's go." As he said that, he snapped his fingers. The next moment, the shoes on his feet made a few clicks and buckles popped out. The two pairs of shoes joined together and continued to extend. Finally, they combined into something that looked like a skateboard. However, this skateboard didn't have wheels. Instead, two small wings popped out from both sides. Jet holes appeared under the shoes and at the back. The jet holes sprayed out a stream of light blue particles. Under the strong repulsive force, the young man quickly levitated. His eyes were immediately filled with excitement. He shouted loudly, "Woo woo, first hunting ground, your hunters have arrived." The bald middle-aged man behind him quickly reminded him loudly, "Young master, you came to the first hunting ground to become a level 10 great hunter. Therefore, try not to use these high-tech methods. You must maximize the potential of your body." Hearing this, the young man shook his head helplessly. "Oh well, it's been a long time since I walked." As he spoke, he snapped his fingers again. The hoverboard under his feet landed on the ground, and with a few clicks, it returned to the shape of a shoe. "Let's go." The youth leaped into the air. In the blink of an eye, he had traveled 340 meters. The bald middle-aged man smiled, lifted his feet, and followed him. It was obvious that he had a much easier time crossing the 340 meters than the young man. At the same time, he continued to exhort, "Young master, you're here for the sake of breaking through to become a level 10 great hunter. If it's not too dangerous, I won't help you." The long-haired young man shook his head impatiently. I know. According to the information I have, the strongest creature in the first hunting ground is only a level 10 mutated creature. As for the inferior humans in the first hunting ground, not a single great hunter or psychic master had appeared. What danger could there be? To put it bluntly, we are the most powerful beings here. My mother is too much. She actually let a level 5 psychic master like you protect me. How worried is she about me? The bald middle-aged man could only listen with an awkward smile. 2 days later, the sea dragon clone's strength had risen to a level 6 mutated beast. In another 2 days, when it rose to a level 8 mutated beast, Immortal planned to personally control the sea dragon clone and enter the sea to crush a group of mutated sea beasts. However, on this day, he suddenly had a thought. He had left a level 10 psychokinesis in the Chile base, and it was suddenly killed. Immortal didn't pay much attention to it at first. After all, he had left a few hundred level 10 psychokinesis behind. The loss of 1 or 2 didn't affect him at all. He really couldn't be bothered to cross half the world for a level 10 psychokinesis. However, in the following day, he lost contact with 3 level 10 psychokinesis. Immortal had to take this seriously. He ordered the remaining 7 psychokinesis in the Chile base to gather together. At the same time, they were to immediately report if they discovered anything. However, in the next 2 hours, 2 level 10 psychokinesis were killed. Immortal slightly furrowed his brows. Although level 10 psychokinesis wasn't the strongest on Earth, It had no problem dealing with mutated creatures below level 5. Now that level 10 psychokinesis were dying one after another, there must be a creature far stronger than level 5 behind this. A level 10 psychokinesis reported to Immortal from a distance. Master, according to the information we have, it seems that something is hunting us. Another level 10 psychic reported, that's right. When we went outside the base in the past 2 days, we found that all the mutated creatures below level 5 around the base were basically killed. And we just got in touch with another base nearby. In their base, a few level 10 hunters were also killed. We guess that this powerful murderer must be hunting all the powerful creatures regardless of species. Hearing this, Immortal thought for a moment in his heart. He gave an order to Emma in his mind. Emma, you're close to the chilly base. Go and see what's going on. Emma's voice quickly sounded in Immortal's mind. Yes, master. After doing this, Immortal lay back on the recliner under the grape trellis in the yard. Looking up at the night sky, he yawned and closed his eyes. This was the benefit of having a powerful subordinate. Some problems could be solved by this subordinate. He didn't have to do everything himself. The next morning, after Immortal woke up, he checked the level of the sea dragon clone. The sea dragon clone was now a level 7 mutated beast. And Immortal's virus clones could only catch a large number of level 7 mutated beasts to feed it. It would probably become a level 8 mutated beast by tomorrow morning. And Immortal was ready. When it became a level 8 mutated beast, he would control it to explore the sea and search for treasures. Especially the dragon ruins at the bottom of the sea, Immortal couldn't forget about it. At the same time, near the chilly base, a woman with an enchanting figure, a delicate face, and blonde hair and red eyes appeared with a boy about 10 years old. The boy's eyes were dull and didn't seem to be intelligent. The woman had a pair of wings on her back and fair skin. Her eyes were as red as blood. She was obviously a vampire. This was Emma and her son. Chapter 196. Chilly Base by the Shore. The long-haired young man and the bald middle-aged man were resting on a rock. The long-haired young man's long hair danced in the sea breeze. He picked up the pebbles beside his feet and tossed them into the sea. He said, "This first hunting ground is so boring. The creatures here are too weak. There's no challenge at all. If this goes on, when will I be able to break through?" The bald middle-aged man smiled and said, "Young master, we have set up a restriction on the first hunting ground. Only the top creatures here can reach level 10 super mutated. There are very few that can cause you trouble. This is also the reason why Madam arranged for you to come to the first hunting ground. After all, this place is much safer than the other hunting grounds." The long-haired young man pouted. "Don't mention my mother. She's the one controlling me at home. Now that I'm here, why do you keep mentioning her in front of me? Isn't it annoying?" The bald man quickly lowered his head. "Yes, I promise I won't mention her again." Just as the two of them were talking, two figures flew over quickly from the mountain peak in the distance. Their speed was almost 500 meters per second. Seeing this, the bald man was overjoyed. "Young master, the challenge is here." The long-haired young man was instantly energized. He jumped up and turned to look at the figures in the sky. Blonde hair, crimson eyes, a beautiful face, and an enchanting figure. Her left hand was hugging a 10-year-old child. Seeing this, the young man's eyes lit up. "I didn't expect there to be such a beautiful woman in the first hunting ground." The bald man quickly reminded him. "Young master, the humans in the hunting ground are all inferior humans. They are primitive humans. You must not have any thoughts about them." The young man waved his hand impatiently. I know. The humans in the hunting ground are all prey. I'm just taking a look. I don't really want to do anything." Emma landed on the ground and carefully placed her son beside her. She then looked at the two of them and said coldly, "Did you guys kill the people in the base?" The long-haired young man smiled mockingly and said in English, "For you, prey. We are hunters. Isn't it natural for us to hunt prey?" Emma said coldly, "A life for a life. Then die." As she spoke, her level 10 psychokinesis instantly attacked the long-haired young man. At the same time, she arrived beside the young man in just a second. Although the young man was not injured by the level 10 telekinesis attack, his speed was affected to a certain extent. It was during this time that Emma arrived in front of him. The claw hook on its right wing was aimed directly at the young man's chest. The young man didn't have time to dodge and could only raise his right arm to block. Crack! Sparks flew as Emma's right claw tore off the long-haired young man's sleeve. Emma frowned. That was because the young man's right arm was actually a black metal mechanical arm. The entire metal mechanical arm was connected to the young man's shoulders seamlessly. Attaching a mechanical arm to a human body was clearly not a technology that should exist on Earth. When the young man saw that his sleeve was torn, he chuckled. Are all inferior humans so impatient? We've only met for a short while and you're already taking off your clothes? The bald middle-aged man next to him reminded him. Young master, be careful. She is a level 10 super mutant blood breed and also a level 10 psychokinesis. The young man was slightly surprised. But then, his eyes were filled with fighting spirit. This will be a challenge. As he spoke, the flesh on his right shoulder quickly wriggled and soon covered the entire mechanical arm. Then, a 5-meter-long saber formed on the mechanical arm. The back of the saber was in the shape of a sawtooth. He waved the saber and slashed at Emma. Emma used her advantage in speed to dodge the saber and then continued to attack the long-haired young man. Soon, Emma gained the upper hand with the advantage of her level 10 psychokinesis. Seeing this, the young man grinned and said, I couldn't tell that this coquettish girl has some skills. Since that's the case, I'll use all my strength to fight you. As he spoke, the saber on his right arm started to glow with a fiery red light. After a while, the 5-meter-long saber looked like a saber that had just been taken out of a fire. It was fiery red all over. The air around the saber was slightly distorted. It was obvious that the temperature of the saber was extremely high. The next moment, he swung his right arm. The saber instantly left his body and flew forward. At the end of the saber, there was a fiery red chain connected to it. The saber came so fast that even Emma couldn't dodge it. Her right arm turned into a hard-horned claw and instinctively wanted to block it. Chi, with a soft sound, her entire right arm was easily chopped off by the saber. Blood immediately spurted out. One must know that the claw that Emma's right arm turned into could easily split open metal and stone. Not only was it sharp, but it was also extremely hard. But now, it was easily chopped off by the opponent's chain saber. How could Emma not be horrified? The young man retracted the fiery red chain saber and said proudly, Hee, a low-level creature will always be a low-level creature. Don't blame this young master for being ruthless. As he spoke, he waved the chain saber and attacked Emma again. But at this moment, Emma's body kept emitting cracking sounds. Accompanied by these sounds, her body quickly became bigger. Her eyes were so red that they could drip blood. On the right arm that was originally chopped off, the bones quickly grew out. Around the bones, blood vessels, muscle tissue, and finally, skin began to grow. Very quickly, Emma's body reached a height of 100 meters. Her wingspan reached a width of more than 500 meters. Although it didn't reach the extent of covering the sky, it was still very imposing. The young man was stunned at first, but the next moment he laughed. Taking off your clothes when you can't win, isn't that a disgrace to the refined? The current Emma was 100 meters tall, and her previous clothes were already torn apart. But she didn't care about that. Her right hand turned into a claw and grabbed at the young man. The young man's eyes were filled with fighting spirit. The fiery red chain saber on his right arm danced and attacked the huge Emma. His fiery red high-temperature chainsword could easily split open Emma's body. But such a small injury was not worth mentioning compared to Emma's 100-meter tall body. After fighting for more than 20 rounds, the young man's stamina seemed to be running out. The chain saber retracted back into his body. The horned layer that wrapped around his right arm quickly receded. His right arm returned to the mechanical arm from before. Seeing this, the long-haired young man cursed, F***ck. Then he turned around and fled. But his speed was still too slow for the current Emma. Emma was about to catch up to him. He could only snap his fingers. The shoes on his feet quickly pieced together into a flying skateboard. He quickly fled at a speed of 1,000 meters per second. Seeing that the long-haired young man had fled, Emma flapped her wings and pounced at the bald middle-aged man. The bald middle-aged man snorted coldly. "You don't know what's good for you." The next moment, a huge amount of telekinesis directly pressed down on Emma. Boom! Emma was pressed to the ground by the huge telekinesis. The earth trembled, and the trees next to her kept shaking. Several rocks on the coast also fell into the sea with a plop. Looking down from the sky, it was like a huge bat had fallen to the ground. Chapter 197. The young man had already escaped 2 kilometers away, but when he saw the huge Emma, he was crushed to the ground. He immediately made a turn in the air and flew back. He shouted to the bald middle-aged man, "Let me do it." As he spoke, his right arm turned into a flaming red chain blade and was about to kill Emma. When the bald middle-aged man saw him condense the flaming red chain blade again, his expression changed greatly. He said, "Young master, forcefully activating a genetic martial art a second time in such a short period of time will cause too much damage to your body." The young man waved the flaming red chain blade impatiently. I know. Anyway, I have plenty of healing medicine at home. Won't I recover after taking a few?" The bald middle-aged man regained his composure and nodded. "That's true. But young master, don't make a move first." The long-haired young man was unhappy. "But don't tell me you still have feelings for her?" The bald middle-aged man blushed slightly and said, "Young master, you must be joking. What I mean is that this prey is an excellent sparring partner. Young master, wait until you recover your strength before continuing to spar with her. Your battle experience and battle awareness will increase quickly. Who knows, whether you can break through your limits or not will depend on her." When the long-haired young man heard this, his face lit up. "That's good too. But you said that I can break through on her. You are insulting me." When the bald middle-aged man heard this, his face turned slightly red. This young master had a noble status, but he was always full of filthy words. It did not match his status. After that, the two of them walked quickly and left. Emma's body had already shrunk to normal size. She quickly took out a set of clothes from her son's bag and changed into it. After that, she reported everything to Immortal in her mind. When Immortal heard Emma's report, he thought to himself, "From the words and actions of these two people, they did not seem to be humans from Earth. Damn, there were really aliens?" What was up with the long-haired young man's mechanical arm? They called the mechanical arm a genetic martial art? It seemed that the power of this mechanical genetic martial art was much stronger than ordinary genetic martial arts. They also said that Earth's creatures were prey and that Earth was a hunting ground. There seemed to be a shocking truth behind this. At the same time, this made Immortal feel very unhappy. Earth was a hunting ground and Earth's creatures were prey. You guys sure talk big. With that in mind, he ordered Emma in his mind. "If they come to fight with you again, lure them to China." Emma replied, "Yes, master." After resting for 3 hours, the two of them flew back again. The youth looked at Emma, who had already put on her clothes, and spoke maliciously. "Yo, little girl, you put on your clothes quite quickly. Then let's see if you can put it on faster than I can make you take it off faster." As he spoke, the genetic martial art on his right arm condensed once again. Emma obeyed Immortal's instructions and did not fight him. Instead, he picked up his son and flew towards the east. "Trying to run?" The long-haired youth laughed and said, "Do you think you can escape?" He stepped on the hoverboard and chased after Emma. Moments later, he caught up with Emma. Emma had no choice but to put her son aside and continue fighting with the long-haired youth. The result was the same as before. The long-haired youth was no match for Emma. However, with the bald middle-aged man beside her, Emma could not kill the long-haired youth even if she wanted to. She could only carry her son and continue flying towards the east. The long-haired youth rested for more than 2 hours. After recovering his strength, he chased after her again. Just like that, the cycle continued. China. In these 2 days, Immortal's sea dragon clone had been promoted to a level 8 super mutated beast. Those powerful super mutated beasts usually lived in the deep sea. Immortal could not catch them with his telekinesis alone. Therefore, if he wanted to promote again, Immortal would have to control the sea dragon clone with his consciousness and go to the sea personally. However, Immortal planned to deal with those 2 guys first. It was on this day that those 2 fellows chased after Emma and arrived in Wuxia. The bald middle-aged man said, "Young master, after these 2 days of fighting, your combat experience and combat awareness have improved a lot. And I used my telekinesis to detect that your cells are much stronger than when you first came here. Their capacity is also much greater. If everything goes well, the next battle should be when you break through your limit." Hearing this, the long-haired youth's eyes were filled with fighting spirit. "Great, I've been waiting for this moment." Then, he used his hover skates to block Emma's path. He chuckled, "Little beauty, although you're not bad-looking, I can't bear to kill you. But I have no choice. In order to break through, I have to bear the pain and kill you. Let this young master admire your naked body one more time." As he spoke, the flesh on his right shoulder wriggled quickly and quickly wrapped around the mechanical arm on his right hand. The flaming scythe condensed once again. It was about to attack Emma. But at this moment, a figure flashed and blocked in front of Emma. This person was slender and had a cold gaze. He was dressed in black. It was none other than Immortal. Seeing this, the youth frowned slightly and stared at Immortal. "You bumpkin, don't block me from admiring the body art." In his opinion, this blood-kindred woman was already the strongest existence in the first hunting ground. This man who suddenly appeared naturally couldn't be stronger than this blood-kindred woman. Therefore, he didn't take Immortal seriously at all. When Emma saw Immortal appear, she heaved a sigh of relief. Immortal turned around and said to Emma, "You're tired." "You're tired? Go rest." Emma nodded respectfully, "Yes, master." As she spoke, she flapped her wings and flew down. She carried her son and flew into the distance. She knew her master's strength. Even if she wanted to watch from the side, she had to stay as far away as possible. Otherwise, if she was caught in the crossfire, she would be seriously injured even if she didn't die. Seeing this bumpkin of the hunting ground ignore him, the long-haired youth couldn't help but feel annoyed. A lowly human, just a prey, dared to ignore a hunter like him, courting death. Thinking of this, the flaming chain blade on his right arm was about to attack Immortal. But at this moment, the bald man beside him suddenly changed his expression. When he looked at Immortal, it was as if he had seen the most unbelievable thing in the world. This was because when he tried to use his telekinesis to probe this man's strength, he realized that his telekinesis couldn't penetrate this man's body at all. This could only mean one thing: this man's telekinesis was stronger than his. How was this possible? The restrictions they imposed on the first hunting ground ensured that there wouldn't be any existence that exceeded level 10 psychokinesis in the first hunting ground. But this man's telekinesis was stronger than his, a level 5 telekinesis grandmaster. What was going on? But amidst the shock, he quickly regained his senses. He quickly pulled up the long-haired youth who was trying to attack Immortal and shouted, "Young master, leave quickly." Chapter 198. Young master, leave quickly. The bald middle-aged man realized that Immortal's telekinesis was far stronger than his. After a short moment of shock, he quickly shouted to the young man beside him. The young man did not understand why a level 5 psychic master would be afraid of a low-level hunting ground native. However, when he saw the panicked look on the bald middle-aged man's face, he realized that things were not going well. He quickly adjusted his flying hover shoes and traveled 1,000 meters in a second, quickly escaping into the distance. Even so, the bald middle-aged man knew that the young master's chances of escaping were slim. He quickly gathered his telekinesis. All the telekinesis of a level 5 psychic master was directed at Immortal. However, at the next moment, Immortal's dragon will spread out. The ferocious and domineering dragon will instantly suppress the telekinesis of the bald middle-aged man back into his body. At the same time, the long-haired young man, who had escaped 2 kilometers away, seemed to have lost control of his flying hovershoes. He immediately fell from the sky. However, before he hit the ground, he was lifted up by an invisible force. He was lifted all the way to Immortal. At this moment, he finally understood why the bald middle-aged man beside him had asked him to run. His genetic martial arts were completely useless in front of this human. All the power in his body could not be used at all at this moment. He was lifted up in the air by that huge force. His entire body seemed to be imprisoned, and he could not even move his eyelids. He looked at the native of the first hunting ground in horror, his heart filled with fear. How could this native be so strong? When the bald middle-aged man saw Immortal staring at the long-haired young man, he quickly shouted at Immortal, "No, you can't kill the young master. Otherwise, the first hunting ground will face a huge disaster. All the living creatures in the first hunting ground will die." Rip! As soon as he finished his words, the long-haired young man was torn into pieces and flew far away. Fresh blood splattered in the wind, looking like wine-red pearls under the sun. Immortal then turned his head and looked at the bald middle-aged man. No one liked being threatened, especially when he was threatened by someone who was a weakling in his eyes. Therefore, Immortal did not hesitate to tear the young man into pieces. With his current draconic will, wouldn't it be a piece of cake for him to tear a level 10 great hunter in half? When the bald middle-aged man saw this, his expression became extremely unsightly. "You're finished. All of you are finished. When Master is angry, millions of corpses will fall and blood will flow for thousands of miles. Your entire hunting ground is finished." Rip! Before he could finish his words, the bald middle-aged man was torn to pieces. Blood splattered all over the ground. Until his death, he couldn't figure out how an aboriginal with such strong telekinesis could appear in the first hunting ground. As a level 5 psychic master, even if he were to go up against a level 6 or level 7 psychic master, he would still be able to put up a fight. In addition to his many trump cards, even if he couldn't win, escaping would be a piece of cake. However, facing this native of the first hunting ground, he did not even have the chance to use his trump card. In the distant sky, Emma saw this scene and felt even more reverence for Immortal's strength. She originally thought that even if her master could crush these 2 enemies, he would still need to use the shocking power of the Blood Buddha. However, she did not expect him to use his telekinesis to tear the 2 of them into pieces so easily. That's it? Using a popular Eastern saying from 30 years ago, it would be, "I've already taken off my pants, and this is all you show me?" Compared to more than 10 days ago when he fought against Count Dracula, her master's strength seemed to be much stronger. Back then, Count Dracula's strength was about the same as her current strength. Her master still needed the gigantic Blood Buddha to suppress him. However, her master could easily tear these 2 enemies who were stronger than him into pieces. It was clear that her master's strength had indeed increased by a lot. At the same time, Immortal landed on a huge rock. He squinted his eyes and went through the memories that he had just plundered from the 2 of them. After a long while, Immortal slowly opened his eyes. In his eyes, there was a trace of shock, a trace of anger, and a trace of indignation. It turned out that Earth was really just a hunting ground. All living things on Earth were just prey for others, including humans. 30 light years away from Earth, there was a planet called the Flaming Continent. Whether it was in terms of technology or biological genes, it was much more advanced than Earth. The humans there searched for life planets in the universe and used them as hunting grounds. On these life planets, they released viruses. When these viruses infected the creatures on these planets and powerful infected creatures appeared, they would come to these planets and hunt these infected creatures. This included the local natives. Earth was the first of all their hunting grounds, so it was called the first hunting ground. Tens of thousands of years ago, they had already released various viruses on Earth. Virus X, zombie virus, blood breed virus. However, on Earth, the infected creatures caused by these viruses were too weak for them. Therefore, very few people visited Earth. With the strength of this long-haired young man, he did not dare to go to other hunting grounds. He could only come to Earth and try to break through his limits. After understanding this, Immortal did not know what to feel in his heart. The humans on Earth were self-righteous and thought that the human civilization they had built was very powerful. However, they did not know that they were just prey in other people's hunting grounds. The humans who thought themselves great were so small and laughable in front of the flaming continent. This strong impact on the world made Immortal unable to accept it for a while. Pessimism? Despair? Fear? It seemed to be a little bit of both, but it also seemed to be none of them. However, after only 10 minutes, Immortal's emotions slowly calmed down. He had the sign-in system and could rise at a speed these people could not imagine. His goal was the Titan Dragon. So what if it was a hunting ground? So what if it was prey? Soon, I will let you know who is the prey. Who is the real hunter? Immortal looked towards the southern sky, his clear and cold eyes blazing with a surging fighting spirit. Next, Immortal ordered a virus clone to go to the South Pole. It was to guard beside the blood-colored waterfall and report to him immediately if anything happened. He knew from the memories of the two that the blood-colored waterfall at the South Pole was the only teleportation coordinate. If the people of the flaming continent wanted to come, they could only teleport there. He wanted to destroy that place, but from the memories of these people, he knew that it was just a coordinate. Even if he destroyed the blood-colored waterfall and Death Valley, the coordinates would still be there. Therefore, there was no need to waste time going there. At the same time, Immortal also felt a sense of urgency in his heart. The long-haired young man he had just killed was the son of the hunting ground owner. He had lost contact with the hunting ground owner's son here. It would not be long before the hunting ground owner would send someone to find him. He might even personally bring someone to find him. And their strength was 100% higher than that of a grand hunter, scavenger. That's why you can't guess. Chapter 199. From the memories of the two, Immortal knew that there were no corpse hunters on the flaming origin continent. The lowest level was hunter. Everyone was no longer an ordinary human when they were born. Some were hunters, and some were psychokinesis. Above the Great Hunter, there were 3 realms. They were Hunter, Desolate Hunter, and Great Desolate Hunter. After each of them surpassed level 10 Great Hunter, they would go to those hunting grounds to gain experience. In their view, every hunting ground was a barren land. As hunters of barren lands, they were called Desolate Hunters. Immortal knew that the next time they sent someone to Earth to find the long-haired youth, they would definitely send a group of Desolate Hunters or even Desolate Hunters. With his current strength, Immortal felt that even if he could deal with those Desolate Hunters, he would most likely lose. Therefore, the most important thing right now was to improve his strength as soon as possible. Of course, the strength of the Sea Dragon clone also had to be improved as soon as possible. What Immortal wanted was not only to be able to deal with them, but to crush them. After returning to the base that day, Immortal asked the base chief to find someone who was more familiar with the geography. He took out the nautical diary and opened the map of the dragon ruins at the bottom of the sea. After looking at it for a moment, the person said carefully, "Mr. Mo, the map shows the Bermuda Triangle of the Atlantic Ocean." Immortal's heart skipped a beat. The Bermuda Triangle? But it was just a shock. In order to improve his strength, not to mention the Bermuda Triangle, even if it was a dragon's pool or a tiger's den, as long as it was 100% safe, he would still go there. After 11 o'clock that night, Immortal did not use the special event to sign in. Instead, he directly specified the modification liquid. 20,000 drops of modification liquid was enough for him to be promoted to level 9 Great Hunter. After taking the 20,000 drops of modification liquid, he was successfully promoted to level 9 Great Hunter. After the promotion, he did not stop at all. His consciousness switched to the Sea Dragon clone. Controlling the Sea Dragon clone, he swam out of the mouth of the Yellow River and entered the Bohai Sea. Compared to other oceans, the Bohai Sea was not big. but its area was nearly 8,000 square kilometers. In such a large area of the sea, the number of mutant creatures was also extremely large. Immortal controlled the sea dragon clone to slowly move forward in the water. Seeing the 28-meter-long sea dragon clone, the mutant fish and shrimps swayed their bodies and swaggered over. All of them turned around and fled in panic. Immortal was too lazy to chase after them. These were all super mutant beasts below level 5, and were of little use to the current sea dragon clone. His dragon will continue to scan his surroundings. Soon, a level 10 super mutated beast appeared more than 30 kilometers away. It was a mutated devilfish that was 30 meters long. Immortal nodded. Level 10 super mutated beast, that was his goal. He controlled the sea dragon clone, swaying its tail and moving its limbs. Soon, he entered the sight of the mutant devilfish. When the mutant devilfish saw that this creature dared to intrude into its territory, it immediately opened its mouth and hissed. Roar! Although it was in the middle of the sea. However, he could still feel the aura of its roar. Under normal circumstances, the other mutated creatures would have turned around and fled upon hearing its cry. However, Immortal ignored it and continued to swim toward the mutant devilfish. Seeing this, the mutant devilfish couldn't help but roar angrily again. Roar! The next moment, its whole body leaped like lightning and swam toward Immortal. Immortal sneered in his heart. His dragon will instantly spread out. If his original body was here, he could tear the mutant devilfish into pieces with his level 3 dragon will. However, the sea dragon clone could only withstand level 2 dragon will. Even with level 2 dragon will, the tail of the mutant devilfish had been torn apart. The mutant devilfish screamed in pain. It continued to struggle in the sea. Immortal took the opportunity to swim over. He swung his tail violently. Slap. It hit the head of the mutant devilfish hard. The sharp blade on the tail directly cut open a bloody wound on the head of the mutant devilfish. The wound was so deep that bones could be seen. The sea was suddenly dyed red with blood. Immortal controlled the sea dragon clone, and its sharp claws slashed across the abdomen of the mutant devilfish. Rip. A large piece of flesh was torn out of its abdomen. After the sea dragon clone swallowed half of the flesh, it opened its mouth again and bit the mutant devilfish. The mutant devilfish was furious. It could clearly feel that its strength was much stronger than its opponent, but it couldn't beat him. How could it not be angry? In its anger, it didn't retreat. Instead, it continued to open its mouth and bite Immortal's sea dragon clone. At this moment, Immortal's dragon will spread out again. It directly attacked the brain of the mutant devilfish. The mutant devilfish felt a sharp pain in its brain and almost fainted. Immortal took the opportunity to bite the back of the mutant devilfish with his huge mouth that was 7 to 8 meters long. The back of the mutant devilfish was originally covered with a layer of horny armor that was extremely hard. However, the teeth of the sea dragon clone were far sharper than the teeth of ordinary mutated beasts. After biting through the back of the mutant devilfish, Immortal controlled the sea dragon clone, and its body kept rolling. Death roll. After rolling more than 10 times, the horny armor on the back of the mutant devilfish, along with a large piece of flesh, was directly peeled off. Several bones were directly exposed to the sea. The surrounding sea water was dyed red. It was as if a large amount of blood mist was rising. Ow! Hiss! The mutant devilfish once again let out a hissing sound. However, it wasn't a threat this time, but a scream. The shrill scream traveled along the seawater and spread over a radius of more than 10 kilometers. Within 10 kilometers, all the mutant beasts trembled in fear when they heard the screams, and quickly retreated into their respective caves. The mutant devilfish still wanted to escape. However, Immortal's sea dragon clone's huge mouth directly bit its head this time. The sharp teeth directly penetrated its skull. In the end, the mutant devilfish struggled for a moment, roared a few times, and slowly quieted down. The sea dragon clone was already a level 8 mutated beast. Coupled with the level 2 dragon will, it was not a problem to kill a level 10 mutated beast that was 2 levels higher. After more than 20 minutes, the sea dragon clone had completely devoured the level 10 mutated beast. Its body length had now reached 29 meters. Its level had also risen to a level 9 mutated beast. It was only a hair's breadth away from becoming a level 10 mutated beast. Immortal controlled the sea dragon clone and killed another level 10 mutated beast. After devouring it, the sea dragon clone successfully became a level 10 mutated beast. At this time, the sea dragon clone was completely able to withstand Immortal's level 3 dragon will. Immortal couldn't help but feel a little excited. Now that it had become a level 10 mutated beast, the next step was to evolve into a dire beast. Chapter 200. The sea dragon clone had become a level 10 super mutated beast. Next, it was time to move on to the next level. Immortal learned from the memories of the two people from the flaming beginning continent that the level after the super mutated beast was called the desolate beast. The desolate beast was much stronger than a level 10 super mutated beast. In the next few days, Immortal searched for level 9 and level 10 super mutated beasts in the Bohai Sea to devour. There were about 50 level 10 super mutated beasts in the 8,000 square kilometers of sea. As for level 9 super mutated beasts, there were more than 1,000 of them. After Immortal devoured so many level 9 and level 10 super mutated beasts, the sea dragon clone still couldn't evolve. It wasn't because it had reached its limit. The sea dragon clone's strength was one realm higher than Immortal's. Therefore, for it, the limit should be a level 10 dire beast. The reason why it couldn't evolve after devouring so many mutated beasts was because the energy it devoured wasn't enough for it to evolve. Immortal had to leave the Bohai Sea and swim to the East China Sea. Along the way, Immortal would let the sea dragon clone devour any level 9 super mutated beasts they encountered. After reaching the East China Sea, he searched for level 10 super mutated beasts with his dragon will and continued to devour them. After 2 days, he devoured 5 level 10 super mutated beasts. Immortal could feel that the sea dragon clone's strength was increasing. But obviously, it was still some distance away from evolving into a desolate beast. At the same time, on the coastline of Dongying, a mutated crow was flying toward the sea in a hurry. As it flew, it let out a hoarse and unpleasant cry. On the ground behind it, a green-faced zombie was also running toward the sea at an extremely fast speed. This crow was Zhao Gao, who was sent to Dongying by Qin Shi Huang to kill the evil man Su Fu. That green-faced zombie was Butcher Bai Qi. However, at this moment, Butcher Bai Qi was surrounded by a large number of colorful mutated snakes that were chasing after him. Butcher Bai Qi kept swinging his bronze sword to kill these mutated snakes. He was now a level 3 super mutated zombie. These mutated snakes were only level 5 super mutated beasts. Logically speaking, it should not be difficult for Bai Qi to kill these mutant snakes. However, there were simply too many mutant beasts. 3 days ago, they discovered Su Fu's lair. Bai Qi immediately brought those zombie figurines to capture the demon Su Fu. However, he did not expect that Su Fu would be able to summon tens of thousands of mutated snakes. They had killed countless mutated snakes, but there were still mutated snakes that managed to burrow into the holes on the zombie figurines' bodies, devouring their flesh and blood. In the end, only Bai Qi managed to break out of the encirclement. Zhao Gao flew out of the encirclement. However, those mutant snakes still did not give up. They chased after Bai Qi all the way to the shore. At this moment, under the encirclement of numerous mutated snakes, a 5-colored mutated snake had climbed up Bai Qi's leg while he was not paying attention. There was a fist-sized hole in his leg. The snake slithered into the hole and began devouring Bai Qi's flesh. Bai Qi stretched out his hand and reached into the hole. He grabbed the tail of the mutated snake and fiercely pulled. Bang! This tug actually tore the snake apart. As for the front half of its body, it was still inside Bai Qi's leg, continuing to devour his flesh. Other mutated snakes continued to swarm over. Bai Qi swung the bronze sword in his hand and killed over 50 mutated snakes. Then he swung the bronze sword and slashed at Bai Qi's right leg. There was a soft sound and blood splattered everywhere. The thick smell of blood immediately filled the air. When the mutated snakes smelled the blood, they immediately surged over like a flood. Bai Qi jumped with one leg, instantly covering a distance of over 100 meters. He broke free from the encirclement. At the same time, he called out to the mutated crow in the sky. Zhao Gao! At this moment, the mutated crow's body emitted a series of cracking sounds. Its body was rapidly expanding. Gradually, a naked human form was revealed. This person was emaciated, as if he only had skin and bones. On his back, there was a pair of black wings that were 7 meters wide. It looked like the wings of a crow. Then he pounced down. He grabbed Bai Qi's shoulder and flew toward the sea. As he flew, he cackled. Who would have thought that Butcher Bai Qi would be in such a sorry state? Bai Qi sheathed the bronze sword in the scabbard at his waist and said angrily, "This time, we failed to kill the evil man Su Fu and disgraced the emperor's order. Both of us will be sentenced to death." Zhao Gao chuckled and said, "Hey! The world is in chaos and the great Qin Empire is destroyed. The emperor only has 8,000 soldiers. If he wants to reclaim the lost land and revive the great Qin Empire, every soldier must be used to their full potential. When the emperor is in dire need of manpower, how can he kill his subjects so easily?" Bai Qi was extremely vexed. "I have disgraced the emperor's order. If the emperor doesn't kill me, how can I live?" Zhao Gao was too lazy to continue. He only cackled. "That's for later. We'll talk about it when we get back." Not long after they left, a giant python appeared on the beach. This giant python was made up of thousands of mutated snakes. The giant python was over 100 meters long. On its head sat a Daoist priest. The Daoist priest had white hair and a white beard. He was in high spirits, like an old immortal in the legends. He looked in the direction where Bai Qi and Zhao Gao escaped and laughed. "Ha, Butcher Bai Qi, go back and tell your dog emperor that I, Su Fu, will lead my army to the west today and attack the mausoleum of Emperor Qin. His great Qin Empire will be mine. Let Emperor Qin clean his neck and wait." At the same time, Immortal controlled the sea dragon clone with his consciousness and continued to wander in the East Sea. There were fewer and fewer level 10 mutated beasts in the East Sea now. Immortal was wondering if he should continue to devour more creatures in the sea. Otherwise, if he continued like this, when could he evolve into a wild beast? At this moment he suddenly had a thought. Because he detected that there was a large snake current in the east of the East Sea, which was swimming in this direction. What he saw before was a huge school of fish. But now, what he detected with his dragon consciousness was an extremely large snake current. The snake current was 5 kilometers wide and hundreds of kilometers long. In this huge snake current, there were countless colorful mutated snakes. All the creatures in the East Sea, including the level 10 mutated beasts, could only flee in panic when they saw this huge snake current. Above these snakes, there was a 5-colored giant python that was formed by countless mutated snakes. It was hundreds of meters long. On the head of the giant python, a Daoist priest sat cross-legged. According to the information he received from Emperor Qin, Immortal guessed that this person was very likely to be Su Fu. Su Fu went to the Immortal Island in the sea to seek the elixir of immortality and obtained a virus that could truly strengthen the human body and make people immortal. The virus that he gave to Emperor Qin was a zombie virus that turned Emperor Qin and the others into half-human, half-ghost zombies. Seeing that Su Fu controlled so many mutated snakes, it was just as Emperor Qin said. Su Fu the evil man lived up to his name. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.